Flash the map, don't fumble, keep the nerves off the face. No jokes in the fire, no panic in the place. We going clean, we going lean. We don't let it split, we keep it a team. No loose ends, no wild noise. Hold the line, trust your voice. If the ground shakes, if the shadows grin, we stay locked in. We don't let it turn.
Hello there.
Trust your voice. If the ground shakes, if the shadows grin, we stay locked in. We don't let it turn. Hooke and Leyoric. We don't fall apart. Hooke and Leyoric. We know who we are. Make it straight, make it tight. Not a mess tonight. Hooke and Leyoric. We survive the night. Count to 3, then we make our mark. If the door locks hard, if the fear gets loud, we stay side by side, we go back down. Say it again. We came to win. We came as strong.
What is happening? How are we going? Look at this boy. Look at this boy on the side of the screen. Look at him. I'm muted? You son of a bitch. How dare you? How dare you? Oh, bit of a delay there.
Hello, Leyoric.
Hooke, what is happening?
Yes.
Oh, no. I can see. You know, there was a wee bit of a delay there for B5.
No, I had you muted. Sorry, it was my bad.
I can.
Is there a delay for you?
I can hear myself through your stream.
Mute my stream.
I could also hear all your redeems. I think you're sending your entire stream through Discord.
Discord. Uh-oh.
No, wait. Actually, hold on.
No, that doesn't make sense. My audio sources are separate, man.
I figured it out. I'm lurking your stream, forgot the Moochie. My support was my own problem. Why do you hear myself?
But have you muted?
I know. Look at the wee thing. I forgot about that. That popped up.
Chat, what has happened? Hurry.
What's happening, folks? Yeah, so
Hurry.
I'm live on a Sunday because me and Hooke are doing some co-op Resident Evil 5. We have both got to the stage where we've completed Resident Evils 1 to 4 and 5. We were waiting to do co-op. Hooke's t-shirt is better.
Do it, lady.
Be killed, man.
I knew I liked you.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
See, look,
I am going to find you at work and kick you in the testicles.
BK
Sierra,
Ultimate,
what
it
is
gets better.
happening? How is that better? How is that better? How is that better? Fucking nepotism gone wild. It's like, oh, we have this vibrant universe. We have this great rich storyline. Let's just make it about this one fucking family and not talk about anything else ever again. What do you sell pottery? You make pots? You must be a Skywalker. Fucking
You're
Dustin
wearing a
cousin.
t-shirt from Raccoon City 4. What are you talking about?
He's streaming. He won't hear it. There's no point in even going on about it. It's on brand with the stream.
Let me do some hellos, actually,
Tom
as
Hawk,
well.
thank you very much. It's like the Brady Bunch, but Star Wars. Dara, I knew you were. This is why out of you and Flemish, you're the favorite. I think split screen was going
For my
into
chat?
this game as evens.
Folks, welcome on. How are yous? Hope you're well. Everybody's here tonight. Absolutely
know.
everybody, York. We're blessed. We're lucky.
It's class. It's class.
How
I think
nice
I
are
might just
people?
change the Sunday nights because Hooke seems to
Aye.
have the monopoly on the old Sundays. The
No.
Lord's Day.
That's ironic. No. I'm only joking. Hey, if you're going to keep the co-op thing going and do Sunday nights, fine by me. That's...
I would do you every Sunday night. You know what? You know what's like, babes.
Oh, hi. Don't threaten me. Be a good time.
Jesus, there's two of them. Legolas, don't you dare. Don't you dare. I can see what you're saying about me.
Right, I'm good, sir.
Why am I not the favorite? Why are you not the favorite Leyoric? You're not even a Leyoric. Why would you be the favorite Leyoric of all the Leyorics? Technically, it's
Why am I
12
not the
p.m.
favorite
here.
York? What? I'm the favorite. I'm the best.
Leyoric,
Member
I'm
of the Hooke
sorry.
family. Regulars and-
Reddy's
don't have
Reddy's the
the
favorite.
brains.
Yes.
Ready
Need
to
my
favorite Northern
walk-ons.
Irish
All
streamer.
streams also need them, and I need them streaks. You do. I think we did float that idea a while back, and I think it's a good one where we all, for certain members of the community, everybody
Yeah.
synchronizes whatever walk-ons they have for them. They pick one, and everybody has that sound for them.
I do think that's a good idea. Honestly, because then
7
it's-
minutes.
We've all
7 minutes is all I can
Uniform?
spare to play
No
with you.
accidentally done it for Tomahawk, where we've just chosen
Well.
the 7 minutes one. Like I think
Well,
Flemish
no,
has the same
Tomahawk's
for
it, mate.
Did he? Oh,
Aye.
it's all
See?
coming out now.
50 stream streak, Richards. I
My
wonder if you
God,
have the top
50.
here. Leoric's covering the Undertaker. That's not good. But I wonder if you have the top spot. I wonder.
I cover him. Did I break the streak? 1, 2, 3.
You broke the streak.
In class.
It just says streak, and then it says your face.
To be fair, it's not the first time someone streaked across my face.
It's not the first time I have. That's true.
Jesus.
There he is, coming into my chat too. What a guy. What a guy.
He will rub it in my
Thank you
face.
for the chicken.
Legolas, that's your brother. Jesus Christ.
I
I'm
like the
everywhere.
shared chat, you know. Like I know
Did
we're
he?
used
It's
to the
good.
shared chat from Flemish and Sierra streams.
Tomahawk's a
But I
level
like
4
it.
goblin healer. Can you beat the boss today?
Listen to those walk-on sounds. Nothing better. Thank you for the check-ins as well. Much
I can't
appreciated.
listen
Better than
because
Brock Lesnar.
because I've now muted the stream that I was lurking on.
Nah, 'cause you're
Thank you,
dumbass.
Ultimate. Thank you very much for the sub. I appreciate you, buddy.
Nicholas, thank you for the check-in. Bean, thank you for the 100 bits.
So the plan for the night is we're going to start playing Resident Evil 5. Now,
Lord,
we're
thank you.
both seasoned professionals at the Resident Evil games. We are experts. There's going to be no shenanigans. There's going to be no fucking about. It's going to be proper professional, like SWAT.
That's true.
We haven't even decided which character we're both going to play.
No, we didn't actually. Rock, paper, scissors.
All right.
Ready, ready?
Right, go. Fuck.
Oh,
You got. All right, you get the pick.
don't know who I'm picking, but sure, we'll see.
See, what are you doing it for? I won. What do you want? I know. Just going to be a
Just-
stream of
just for
thank yous. It
bragging.
is. It is. Thank you. Sorry about that. Thank you. Sorry.
I
Excuse
can
me.
pass the main
Sorry.
menu here. I don't even know how we invite in this game and how we do co-op. I don't even
Well,
know if
one
Steam
of us
supports
sets
it. We're gonna find
sets up the map, and the other invites the other person on. Proper professionals.
Right,
Nearly
okay.
choked on my wine. How dare you? How dare you? Right. So
Here.
one of us has to start the game, and then the other one clicks join game.
That's all right. Would you like to open a web page? No, I would not. It's just.
Do you chat for
standard
40
play-
minutes as well? No. I'm going to be the one pushing this fucker along.
Tomahawk invited me last night to have a wee chin mic. He was like, listen, be about an hour. No bother. That's grand. Or in 45 minutes.
Sure, there was that time me and you went to the car boot sale, and we stood in the car park for about an hour afterwards chatting, and your son was like, Daddy,
I want to go.
I want to go home.
Stay away from the summoner!
Wait, why is there
Legolas.
no beard plus hair clone of you? I know. It's my Hook is my son. But we thought we'd just
Upside
go
down
tell
head.
everybody.
The orc has the hair here. I have it here.
Yep.
It's so like if he merges together like in Dragon Ball, it's the perfect head of hair.
You couldn't have picked
That's
a
what's
good
up.
anime. You picked Dragon Ball.
It's the best anime.
Jesus. Jesus.
Dragon Ball's the best. How dare you? Just because you haven't watched it, you can't
I
give a
thought I
grief. You haven't
tried-
watched it.
I tried. It was shit. It was like, this is what Bleach did better.
Nah. Bleach was Dragon Ball came first, right?
Hook is actually sitting upside down. That's what it is. I've just rotated my camera and cloned it. You're right.
Sit down. Folks, these are way good though. Thank you very much for coming on because I mean, when we did this with Portal, we were very nervous, weren't we? Because we weren't sure how it was going to go and how we could keep up with chat and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But much appreciated, of course. So I just go new game then.
You go new game, and I think it might give you an option to host. I'm not 100% sure. I have an option to join game.
Yeah, I seen that too. Yeah. Co-op
it's
settings. What the fuck does rule mean?
Custom match.
Invite only. Right. So play online. Invite only. Right. Okay. Creating game session. Let's see. I don't know if you needed to be on a party with me first. I'm on.
It's
like, a cutscene here.
it's allowing me to search for sessions.
Should have tested this part offline. Never mind OBS.
Yeah, maybe.
Right, I'm stuck in a cutscene anyway for it to finish here. Then I'll figure it out.
How do I flip over?
Hooke and
here?
Leyoric Dragon Ball Fusion. I get Happy Irishman. You will get on it. I know you.
Yeah, ChatGPT. Let's go. Sure. Did you
Oh,
see?
fuck.
Did you see the picture of me and Hook and Resident Evil? I thought we looked pretty muscular. I thought we looked well.
Let me turn the
I
game.
don't know. Don't trust it. Thought I liked you, but then the Dragon Ball is not the best. Bane knows how it is. Should know how to do all this.
You should know how to do this. That's a fair point. We should know.
Aye, but because we're professionals, we hire exclusive IT consultants to do this for us. So it's their fault, really. Because we're professional soldier men. We do all the punches and the kicking and the shooting. We don't do the IT stuff.
Exactly.
I'm just waiting for
It's
his
like he
name to
didn't
pop
test
up
this.
here.
We tested it really about 5 minutes before I can go live. Can't skip this cutscene there. I'm stuck on it.
How are you in a cutscene? I haven't even got past the main menu yet. I play a game and then join game. We'll be lurking today, boys. The rubber won't put itself on the road. Thank no bother. I did see that great pick of both of you. I know. We looked phenomenal.
No, stuck. Thank no worries. No worries at all. Thank you for the lurk, dude. Enjoy driving the Warthog. Exactly, Akira. That is the way. 5 minutes and be like, yeah, that's good enough.
I love the fact that I haven't got a cutscene yet. And you're already like fucking away in a cutscene. Flam Flam, welcome on.
Tell me what you want.
For fuck's sake.
Oh,
I'm switching that off.
excuse me?
Right, I have the game turned
No.
down. So you can
What
let
do
me
you
know how
say?
audio is as well, folks, by the way. You
No.
can hear Leyoric versus
No.
the game and stuff.
Oh no, the dog thing went away. Oh no.
One of you needs to get in control of Krish, and then you can invite. It's a Scotch janky. Right, okay. Thank you, Asher. Thank you. Hello,
Lord's
by the way.
quite quieter than you in this stream.
Loric is a bit quieter than you in this stream. Right,
He
okay.
does that on purpose so he can sound more voluminous.
Well, I should sound
voluminous.
more, like, you know, because I'm more important.
Cleo! Come for your
Right, I've
treat,
turned it up a
dog.
bit. Really, so you can let me know.
I'll slap him.
I'll
Hear
slap
it?
him.
What is happening? The arc's a bit low, but it might just be me. I was feeling a bit down earlier, so that must be why I feel low.
No,
But I-
he is
but I-
quiet, to be fair, because even for me in Discord, I haven't turned up to 200%.
I'm gonna be in and
He
out
just
of my
speaks
chat.
quietly in general.
Making a sunflower bucket hat. Amazing. I could do with a hat. No, you
Right,
hope you're
I've
feeling
tapped out
better.
of the game. In
I
case
was really
you're
unwell.
wondering,
I'm
chat.
such a bad friend. I didn't even know already wasn't well.
Right, I have your gain set as 100% here, Leyoric, and Discord you're at 200%, so I can't turn you up any louder. It's impossible.
We'll hook it a hook. No, that will not cheer me up. That'll do the opposite. Kraken, welcome on. What's the story? What's cracking? How's it going?
Hook.
We're stuck in the menu because Hook can't fucking.
We're in a mandatory cutscene.
What? You're a mandatory cutscene.
I'm not even watching it too. So I don't even know what's going on. Terrible start.
It's bringing up names of people who are currently live, but it brings up one page of them.
Right.
I find it refreshing.
John, thank you for the check-in. Much appreciated. Right, I finally have control.
Give me where I can send one, and I'll make you a hat. Ooh. Can we get hats? Are we getting hats? Do I get straw hats?
Huh? Right. How do I invite?
Cough still lingers a bit, but in general, a lot better. No way, ready. How did our day at work? What a team. Who's worse? And what and what difficulty? We haven't even got past the main menu. That's how difficult it is at the moment. We decided to go through and plan out the cameras and audio and stuff. And the actual game we never even looked at.
No. I don't even know how to invite you.
You know what I'm
I
thinking?
don't know if through Steam overlay, maybe. Right, okay, let's have a look.
Do you know what I'm thinking? Because I'm a mod in your stream, if my auto shout-out shouts out in my stream, will it shout out in yours then afterwards?
Oh,
Tash,
yeah.
what's happening? What a
Is it
duo.
our
I know.
first-
I know.
What a duo. Thanks. Thanks.
Don't know. Stream overlays, maybe. I can't remember how
Right,
me and
see if I
Chris
can
did it.
invite you that way. I'll try and invite you here. Where are you?
Yeah, you might as well do something saying you fucking hate me.
Why are you not showing up on Steam? Are you offline?
I might be offline. I'm online now. There. There. Like a
Ah,
Luffy
there you
straw hat. I've crocheted that. I'm very good. If they start a game and invite on. I'm waiting for him to do it. This is the issue we have
Invite
whenever we play multiplayer games in general. Hooke is
Here we
always
go.
the issue with invites.
Here we
And
go.
with
Sent you an invite there.
hosting of games in general.
Thank you, AJ. It's not obvious by any means. Did you have to like just do it through Steam?
No, it is not. We're joining session. Ooh, party level 13.
Leyoric
Ooh,
has
level
joined
up.
your game. Right, okay, let's see. Ian?
Oh, fuck. It cancelled. I clicked into the game and it cancelled it. Go and do it again.
Can't get the staff.
It's not my fault. The game.
It is your fault.
It's not. I blame
Invite to
shenanigans.
game.
I blame Tom Selleck. I have to get into the game before.
Hooke's cup has been admired 37 times. Sorry, Ruthie, I didn't see it. Look at that.
I have to get in before.
The new
I'm
home
sorry.
of Halo.
I clearly have a better cup.
Do you though?
Oh. I was.
Tim the Two-Man Taylor. Asher, yes. Sorry.
I'm off the bed. Busy
So
week.
close.
Catch you fellas later. AJ, no
Start
baller.
from check.
Chat to you later,
Okay.
buddy. Apologies if I'm missing
Chat to you
people in
later,
chat.
thank you very much.
Hook is a distracting wee shite.
That's my face, isn't it?
It is. It is. Restart from checkpoint.
Right, I did.
Right. So
Partner
am I?
isn't ready yet, it
Am I Shiva?
says. You must be.
If I just press ready then. Ready
Yeah.
player 2.
So
Ta-da! Which one of you gets to punch the boulder? In real life, me. In the game, probably Hook.
Sorry, we're going.
Right,
We're
let's see
going
if you're on this thing.
streaking.
I'm Shiva.
You in the game?
Cool
And into
beans.
the
Cool
gymnasium.
beans.
Come
Kraken,
on,
thank you very
everybody.
much for the 5 stream streak. Awesome sauce. Right, there we go. I'm alive!
Oh, interesting. I don't see your streaks in the shared chat. So it's just chat. I
Oh.
don't see your events.
Hook, look at my arse. Look at that.
Gladly.
Look at that.
Mine. No, never mind. My jacket covers it. Sorry. Shiva.
Shiva.
Shiva? I don't know.
Watch your back. Whoa, the piss filter. I know it's just that time of games. I think B locks onto your partner.
Heck, are they doing?
They are killing a bag.
I don't like the look of that. It's not nice. Controls are a bit jank so far. I shall
So
say.
I am going to pop Hook's volume up a wee bit because the game is a wee bit loud compared to him.
I had the game turned down quite a bit, so you can hear Leyoric as well, so it might be too low. You let me know.
Good luck on the Leyoric's
Increase.
ass.
See on Discord, Leyoric, can you increase your volume output to me?
Give it a go.
That'll help.
Yeah. Output volume. Wah! How's that?
It has made you a bit tired. You're now peaking, so that's good. Oh shit, sorry,
Peaking?
chat. No,
Why
that's
is
good.
Master
I don't
Chief
have
and
you
Lara
peaking.
Croft not there?
Because I
Never
didn't
been
install
more-
the mod yet, latency. Also, what is happening? Hurry. Welcome on. I think B locks
Cheats.
onto your partner. Let's try it and see. Not
It must-
on PC, you know.
And,
Right trigger.
right trigger. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. There we go. Thank you. That's a good tip. So where the fuck are we going?
I'm following you. You're the man in charge. Is this not where they were beating up the person?
We ran past that.
Did we? Right, okay.
Yeah. Maybe I should follow you.
I don't know. Can I...
Oh, this camera angle is shocking.
It's shocking. Stars and bars, welcome on. What's happening?
Oh, what's happening, dude?
Hey,
Good
lurking
evening.
boofies.
Lurking both of you. Much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Well, we've beat the... Oh, if you press right bumper, it brings up a map.
Oh, so the yellow waypoint. That's where we're going. Right, okay.
Yeah. Yellow. Oh, no. I was going to say push me in the wheelbar, but I don't think you can.
Next open. Here we go.
Follow each other and the entire stream run in a circle. It's probably what's going to happen. Never happy about camera angles, are
You're
you?
never happy about camera angles? No, never.
It's like that thing you don't even deny it, Hook. But when the old Tomb Raider games with Lara we were triangle boobs, you used to put her up against the wall so the camera would swing around and you go, ooh.
I was actually talking about Tomb Raider yesterday. I wasn't talking about triangle boobs though, you pervert. I was talking about how you could only jump in 8 directions.
Well, what do you want? Like rhombus boobs? You know, what's your preference?
Any shape, you know? Oh, full say. Doesn't make pay attention here.
I have your weapons for you here.
This is a good place to meet people. The stakes are too high. These boys have beat place.
Grab your
It's better now I can see your reaction.
weapons already started.
What have I done? What have I
And
done?
the cheap pictures to give you
What
the
is
original.
happening?
Oh, the April Fool's ones. Oh no. Is he listening to the orc? No, he's shaking his head. Change
Yours
equipped
just
item.
have nude cheats. What? Never worked. Grizzy, welcome on. It is good to see you, my friend. How are we? Ooh.
I probably shouldn't be wasting ammo.
No, I would say probably not. Right, so there's armor on there, but I'm guessing I don't need that. So how do I equip my gun?
It's why. Tell me why.
Right. Oh, you can't move when you're aiming? Okay.
Well, I don't know. We'll ask him when he comes on.
Latency, thank you for the check-in.
Town square's up ahead. Go through there. Alpha team's waiting at the deal location.
Good.
What do you know about Ouroboros?
Alpha team.
Oh, I've just watched the
Just rumors.
season 2 of Devil May Cry, and that's what that's all about, Ouroboros.
Doomsday
All
sounds
right.
about right. And
Brilliant,
apparently
brilliant anime.
it is no rumor.
You're kidding.
I watched
right?
season 1, I didn't watch
You must
season
find
2
the
yet.
man named
It's only out. It's only out this week.
Is our only
Yeah.
lead.
I'll get around to it.
Spoilers, the Devil's Cry.
And be careful out there.
Right. Sweet.
I have 2 bullets. Fucking wasted one. I'm shooting you.
We stick together.
Turns out
No,
there's
I
no
only have
friendly
2 as
fire.
well.
Don't worry. I may not
You
be as
says
big
you
as
says you've
but I can
10
still hold my own.
Where?
on my screen. It says Shiva
Oh,
2. Press
Shiva.
10.
I'm looking at Shiva. Right. I'm looking around in case there's any more resources.
we're all
in here.
looking at
Sorry,
Shiva.
Ignore me. Ignore me.
This is gonna be quite the adventure. It is. It is. It's like Dumb and Dumber.
It is. Hold on. Investigate.
That door does not open. I think we just go back out the way we came in.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's telling us where to go anyway. So this way.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, what the fuck?
I'll give you a tip. Bricks are dead useful. Is that true? is that true though? Or are you just saying it because you love your brick? Starting to remember why I don't race real people in racing games. They put you and slam you whenever they spun. That's why I don't race people in real life as well. It's a
hate that
wheelie
bit.
it's a really bad idea.
Maybe I should have a redeem for next week where people can mute and hide you for bad jokes. Like, it'll just grey your camera out and mute you for like 10 seconds.
Would you get on here?
Oh, for God's sake.
Would you
Where?
get on here?
Where the fuck did you go? I see you on the map, but I couldn't see you inside the building. Oh, did you go in this door?
Yeah.
No, okay.
You.
I'm not even going to acknowledge that there.
Oh, I can swing a knife. Huzzah! Batman. Oh, found herbs.
Wait,
I think we might have to be very careful about
how did you swing your knife?
LB and trigger.
Oh yeah, right, okay.
I think we might have to be
LB's like a
careful about
block, then?
resources a wee bit.
I'd imagine so. Oh, there's a herb. I'll take that.
If you muted him for bad jokes, you'd be missing the entire stream. That's true. I would just be silent the entire time. Imagine if you could mute my mic from your side. We could probably do it. Reddy probably knows how to do it already in StreamerBot.
Oh, definitely. Reddy will just tell us. He's probably messaging us in the chat right now as we speak.
LB is not a block.
LB is not a block.
No,
Why is he
this is actually this is a Souls game. We're going to parry our way through this.
The Arky just stole what I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, surely this is a parry.
What about the boss fights?
I mean-
What about the boss fights?
You just mute Discord. Why are you beeping?
Because you have to come up to me to the door. I'm over here.
Oh, right, okay. Right, cutscene.
I mean, just mute Discord. No, but to mute me in my own stream. Be funny.
That's what I do, really, if I want to mute. The Ark at the minute is mute Discord. What the fuck?
Nom 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 nom. Trying to parry. Like the remix is a very long playthrough.
Okay, there's no parry. That's good to know. Right, so these aren't traditional zombies then?
I don't like the bars appearing at the top and the bottom of the screen whenever it goes into a cutscene.
Like the letterboxing?
Yeah.
You okay?
Just set up a command that each can use, and then the other activates it, mutes the other person. I thought you were going to say something cool like WebSockets. Say WebSockets.
Yeah, we definitely could do it, really.
I was
Easy
going
done.
to go on by a couple of jokes about this guy's eyes, but the first one was bad, the second one was cornea.
It just comes so naturally to you. That's the annoying part.
It is. It is.
If someone says to me, right, make a pun or like a joke or something, I'd really have to think about it.
Help me out here.
Okay, I was not.
Did you not think to shoot him, though?
I panicked.
What do you mean you panicked?
There we go. I shot him while you slashed about the thin air.
I shot him. And I shot him first, and then I kicked him whenever you were having a wee hug with him. Sammy, what's happening? Mr. Worldwide and Hooke too. I know. It's been a while since we've done a co-op stream.
It has been Portal 2, which was like...
Right, do you
was
mind
that
if I
last
take
year or
this?
the
Do
year before?
you mind if I take this ammo? I have one bullet.
Nah, go for it. Go for it. Anything else about here? But welcome, man. Good to see you, dude. I think it's going to take me a while to adjust to not talking over the top of you by mistake.
Do we go out the window? Yes, you could use WebSockets. See, WebSockets. I knew
See?
it. That's a word.
You can use WebSockets with everything. On the map, no, we do not. No, we do. You're right.
Just like the fucking window. Just looking at what's out that window, just smashes his fist through it.
I know, he didn't even break it too, he just used his head. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, at least he faced the danger head on.
Mute, exactly.
No,
Leighton's
I'm
like,
down here.
Exclamation
I'm
mark,
down
mute Leyoric.
That's not
Right, no,
how
it's not
everyone
that
leaves the house. It is if you don't want to use the front door.
Oh,
Oh,
not seen heavy so far.
¿Dónde estás? ¿Dónde estás? It's
I don't
right. It's
think-
give me instruction for quick turn. I think we run away.
Yeah. Oh, we don't have to run very far. That's handy.
Oh, that was handy.
Is
Simple
this safer
solution:
now?
get a hearing aid, and you just have to turn it off. You don't want to hear anyone. Easy. I'm afraid he would use it too much, so that's the problem.
Well, Leyoric will have a hearing aid in about a year or two, though. So there's that.
Roger on the locals. Put your orders.
How dare you?
What does that mean? Was HQ expecting
I was
this?
giving Leyoric grief today because we were sending these to our messages on WhatsApp, and if you make one typo in a WhatsApp conversation, Leyoric will not understand the entire conversation. Doesn't matter if it's like a paragraph you send. If one letter is out of place, he'll be like,
Oh,
What are you talking about?
I don't like this. This is very sexist, this game.
Why?
I went up to open the door and it says, you'll need Chris to kick this open. I don't like the fact that assumed I can't kick open the door.
Ah, no. It was a double effort. So
You're a double
I don't
effort?
think you can complain there.
Right, you want to take that ammo? I'm going to break these boxes.
Yes, please, yeah.
Okay, I'm not going to break the boxes.
So,
These ones I will do. We have more ammo here, man.
okay, you take it then.
No, there's another one.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Sweet.
And there's a
Right,
hole.
dynamites.
Every hole's a goal. I can't wait to see how long it takes before you stop being so courteous and show us sharing ammo. It won't be very long.
No, it won't be as right. Like, I have no ammo. Ah, shit, one.
This boy's just hanging out. Well. Was there a well?
Simple solution, get a here. Oh, the hearing aid, yeah. Yeah. You're doing a better job of keeping up so far. Right,
There's health there
Jesus
for you, man.
Christ. They won't show the Eurovision on the TV for moral reasons, but this is allowed to be broadcast. Here,
Just wait
this
until
is
they-
quality entertainment.
Just wait until they play the Father Ted episode of this stream.
Who are you? Who am I?
I don't like that. I just because I'm a woman, it assumes I can't open the door by myself.
So you Mrs. Doyle?
I'll get it in a minute. No clues.
Waffles, what's happening, sir? Good evening. Good to see you. Here, RT should reach out to us. I would have happily streamed on RT in place of the Eurovision, you know?
What you really like ammo wise?
I don't. I have 25 bolts. I think I'm alright.
You mind if I
Can you
grab them?
merge herbs in this? I go for it.
What do you like for herbs?
Combine. You can.
I have a,
Right,
I have a green.
Oh, I didn't mean to give you that. But sure.
What'd you give me?
Fine. A herb.
How'd you do that? How'd you?
It's just a menu option. If you go to the herb and press A, then you get a wee sub menu pops up.
Oh, have it
Ah,
is.
cheers. You could have kept it anyway. Ah, well, it doesn't matter. So you can merge herbs in this one, like you can the other one, so that's cool. That's good to know. Makes them stronger.
The fact Hooke asked,
Free herbs.
who am I? I'm Father Ted. And you big Dougal head them. Who am I? I'm Father Ted then. You answer that one, eh? Eh? Knife only
I was
knows
waiting on
rules.
that, Waffles. I was
Free
waiting on that. I was
herbs.
waiting on someone to call me Google. And I get what's happening. There, are we?
Mrs. Doyle, I'll take it. I'll fucking take it.
Wait a minute. That's the...
Was that not our informant though? I think it was. The guy that we met not that long ago.
That
Also,
fellow
we
was
are-
angry earlier. He's going to lose the head
I'm on the
now.
run, just so you know. Just
Are we
improved
all
my performance.
doing phenomenal? Right.
Doing great, man. Can't complain. Nice wee weekend overall, I have to say.
Ah, go on. Will you shoot the zombie in the face? Actually,
No,
you
I'm gonna-
kill one, weren't you?
I'm
Don't
gonna
let
ask a
these
question,
on.
but it's probably a spoiler. These aren't traditional zombies. It seems like they're like, kind of like Resi 4 in the sense that like it's not your standard infection.
You gonna help?
What do you have to do?
Father Dougal and Sir alive. Oh, no, it's alright. I'll do it. You just stand there and look pretty.
Here, I pushed it over the window. Here, hold on. There's a door here. What is this? What do we do here?
Who let Hooke do a co-op game? I know, man.
Who let Dougal do
It's
a
like-
funeral?
Fucking thing all over again. What do you call it? Portal.
I don't even know if I have to shoot these ones. Do we just have to leave? I'm assuming.
What's that, grenade? I'd catch a grenade for you. I'd
Can I
drink
climb?
lemonade for you.
Oh shit. Oh, I have a grenade. Cool.
They're more infected than zombies. Yeah, that's true. What the fuck was
I
that?
mean to do that. I
What'd
got
you
an
do?
achievement, defeat 3 I threw a grenade. I blew a hole in the wall, mind you, but we're not
Hole
talking
in the wall
about that.
gang.
So how
Will I just
impactful
shoot
is
all?
the knife?
Will I just shoot all of them? I'll just do it.
I was shooting as well, you cheeky thing. Wait, there's money in this game. I'll aim for the headshots, you keep shooting them in the shins and stuff like that.
Breaking free.
Gotcha.
Locals are hostile. The gate is sealed, and we're trapped. We need backup, and we need it right now.
Shit.
Oh, fuck, I did a somersault.
You hear that, Sheva? Help's on the way.
Got it. Just hope he gets here quick.
So she's called Shiva, not Shiva. Okay.
Oh, shit. They're coming through the roof. Oh, shit. That boy really took offense. Run.
There's too many. Run. Run. If you can. Get a bit of distance. Oh, explosives.
I need to figure out the controls here.
They're a bit jank. Jesus, look at the big dude. What the fuck? Oh shit.
Some assaulted his face.
Uh-oh. I'm in danger. I'm down.
I'm trying. Where are you?
This is not easy. I'm dead. one attack from an enemy killed me.
I'm getting bloater flashbacks. Run, for fuck's sake.
It's not a hole in the wall, it's an opportunistic door. I agree. Right, is that the end of the game? Do we just...
I ended the game because my partner's dead. The Hook has decided on another game session. Have you? Fucking fair play.
Right, okay. Continue, yes. Right, the hardest part of this so far is the controls. They're brutal.
They're
Right, you
very,
can buy
very
stuff here.
sluggish, aren't they?
They're terrible. Don't have enough money. What do I have? 300. Right, okay.
Yeah, it's laughter double kill.
Right.
Oh, fuck,
Are
right.
we just meant to hold out here then?
I think we're supposed to run whenever your man smashes down that gate.
Right, okay.
Oh, good man. I'll get the other one.
I didn't see the second one. Would you stop giving me grief? Straight
I
back.
think they've never played Resident before. I know. Well, technically I didn't die. It was him. That one dodgy trolley Tesco's with just
Now-
one wheel missing.
No, it has to be said, the controls in this one are terrible versus the other Resi games so far. I'll steal that money you found. Thank you.
There's ammo over here as well.
Okay. Thank you. That's it. I'll not throw the grenade this time because it blew like a hole in the wall, which did not help.
Oh,
Oh,
shit.
shit. I don't like that. Jesus, the squad thing scared the shit out of me. Thank you, John. I forgot to do the squats at the start access. I owe double, John. God, these guys they're twins or triplets.
I think both these do squats. No. No.
Kirk, come in. The locals are hostile. The gate is sealed, and we're trapped.
Oh, they're coming on the door.
And we need it right now.
Yep.
Thank God I can shoot you through you.
You hear that, Sheva? Help's on the way.
Got it. Just hope he gets here quick.
There we go. Right, so are we
Hey,
not going to
John.
run for it then?
I'm reading out your bot thing. If you tap the sprint button,
Right, we need that gate open, don't we?
we'll break him free. Oh no!
Oh shit. I'm fucked here. I am beat. Run, dude, if you can. Just run.
Oh shit! Right, okay. Oh.
Keep going. Oh, I have a grenade as well, sorry. Shit. Oh, I have no ammo. Shit, that's not good.
Get the punching.
Right, throw a grenade. Oh, shit. Yeah, I have no ammo. This is not great. I am not going to be much help. Oh, I found some. Nice.
Oh. Kick him in the face.
Right, let's see.
Right, we can go upstairs.
Oh, can I? Right.
Verticality. Verticality. Look at me, Look at me, Look at me.
There's people up here. Step by.
Oh shit, there is.
Run. I jump back down because bad guys. You just say ooga booga.
Where'd you go?
Oh, come on. I'm dead. I'm dead.
Where are you?
This is wild hard. My god.
I don't know where you are.
There's just no
I'm
end.
downstairs. I had to run away from the big guy.
Gotta hold out till
You're alright.
Right,
Kirk, hurry up and take your time. I am stressed here. Right, where are you? Up there, right.
We're not really keeping up with chat though. It's the one thing I'm worried about.
Sorry, chat, because it's a bit. This game's a bit intense, which doesn't help. And then
No, we're outside. We're not in a tent.
shut the fuck up. Whoa! I was not expecting that explosion to be so huge. Right, ammo. Would be nice.
I don't know where you are.
It's okay. I'm trying to make my way back around you. But get ammo in the process. Watch the big guys behind you. I think.
Yeah.
I downed him a little bit there.
Running.
Don't think we can kill that big guy.
Running.
Yeah, once this action sequence is over, Chad will catch up with you. I'm not sure if there's something we need to do to trigger the end here or something. I want his whip. That's amazing. Oh,
Big
shit.
guy's coming up the stairs behind you.
Yeah, and of course I had to reload.
Go wait for them and then hit the spiral.
Fact. Whoa.
Oh, hello.
That was good. That was good. Oh shit. Terrible time to heal. Get off me. Dick.
Oh, why am I healing you? I meant to heal me. Fuck.
I'm stuck. Oh god, this is so jank.
I don't have any more ammo. Maybe
me
there's
either.
somewhere we're
Just
supposed to be going.
I'd be lost here. Chat, there's something we should be doing.
I am going to wee walk.
Can't pause. Can we?
Oh, I found a gun.
Oh, nice. Right. Mess some people up with it, please.
Where's your man?
Asher, I know,
There's...
has played this, for sure.
I got
What
squashed.
the fuck?
There's an invisible timer. Ah, right, okay. Oh, happy
Is
days.
that it? Did we do it? We did it. There's an invisible timer, right, okay.
Sweet.
Heck, that was
Jesus.
intense, I'm stressed
I
out.
know.
That wasn't enjoyable. I'm
Here,
stressed.
are the locals friendly? They're not local. Like,
Sorry,
co-op
Paul
though.
Chuckle.
Does happen. Does happen, you do have. Barry and Paul Chuckle. To me, to you. To me, to you.
Oh, man. You get absolutely bonked with that big hammer.
I
I don't
did.
know how you're alive.
I did. Just because I'm a legend.
Complete chap-
Just, you know.
You got S tier for enemies routed. So, fair play.
There we go.
Fair play.
I think that was the bring him over to the exploding barrel and go potato. Doosh, skadoosh.
That was good, to be fair.
Hey,
I used two squats. Yes, I owe squats. That's true.
Hook,
Right,
you will wait in the screen while you do your squats that you owe.
I will. I will.
can I
I won't even play music because it's just going to go over the top. I have 20 to do. Chat, Leyoric should be doing these two.
I don't think so. No, no.
That's a
I
cool
don't think
stream,
so.
like. I think you should be
No.
doing 10.
No. Can I upgrade my weapons? Yes, I can. I can't upgrade that any further. Go with any money. Can I buy... I'm gonna... Oh, so I have all some inventory. Is this in my inventory or your inventory? Green herbs. So I have ammo now. Combine. Combine! Look, I think you're just afraid of what squad forms worse than hooks. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly
what it is.
Plus,
I think you're
have,
right, Legolas.
I have no space. Like, right behind me is the wall. I have no space in front of my camera.
Move your chair away, you'd have loads of room.
I wouldn't have loads of room. You just see me big fucking belly protrude up and down. It'd be like if people be tuning on the stream going, "Why am I watching wildlife of a whale having sex with a fucking rock?"
I'll just trigger the David Attenborough TTS in the background. What are you doing?
I smell bullshit. That's probably because I farted.
And here we see Leyoric doing squats.
It has its ups and downs. To be fair though, I have started doing a lot of exercises. I've started doing lunges. I mean, it's not as good as squats, but it's a big step forward.
Sick.
Lunges.
All I can do is apologize for him.
I did phone up as well the other day as well. There was a yoga class going, and I phoned the fella up to see about joining. He said, "How flexible are you?" And I said, "Well, I can't do Wednesdays."
At this house.
You agreed to this. This is kind of your fault.
Right. So,
Legit, but also plays
Wait.
game for 10 seconds. I don't know the controls.
increase your
You're
weapons
enjoying
firepower.
this,
Ooh.
I keep reading your stupid bot.
Well, stop doing that then. Simple solution.
You're not supposed to fix your
Pasty,
hook bot so it
yes.
doesn't respond so often. Like they can beat Dark Souls, Sekiro, Bloodborne, but this is a challenge. This is the challenge we needed.
This
We
is the
smashed
challenge
it.
because of the UI, though. That's what it is.
I think as well, you know where there's sort of streamer brain where you kind of
100%.
lose brain cells because you're streaming. I think it gets
Yeah.
worse on co-op.
Oh, 100%. Like, I've felt tonight so far, I've struggled with chat. You're thankfully doing much better.
I'm
But
not.
I'm struggling. I think it's because the start of the game is so intense, though.
No, it
It's
was
just-
outside. There, it wasn't in a tent.
Shut the That's the fact. It's the fact
Books,
that
what's
you
happening?
can't pause. That's what throws me off a bit. Books, welcome on. What's the crack?
Hook upgraded is gone in store.
Oh, for fuck's sake, did I? Hold on.
Maybe you should make a video of Hook's reactions to the Orc side jokes. No, because my jokes are amazing. You can make a
Oh, thank you, Asher.
you can make a video of the reaction of Hook's reaction to my awesome jokes. That would be a good video.
Right, so I've sold that now.
I don't like the way people keep saying it's a dad joke because not all jokes are dad joke. It's only a dad joke when the punchline becomes apparent. Look at his disappointing face. He's not even angry. He's just disappointed.
That's exactly it. Just like a parent.
Can sell the spare
Right,
one.
okay.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to leave. Can sell the spare one. Thank you. Yeah, I did notice that actually. And thank you for letting me know that I upgraded my gun on storage. I would have been in game, but oh, what the fuck? This is shit.
Do we all have
Maybe we should make a
completely?
video of all
do we
Fuchs reactions.
We have completely separate storage as well.
Aye, that's good though.
No,
Well,
do we
maybe not,
though?
that's
Am I selling stuff that's also in your storage?
Oh no, aye, yours is your own, but we can share with each other in game,
All right, okay.
which we found out by mistake. Your inventories and monies are separate, right? Okay. Did you streamed this, Asher? Didn't you? Co-op? Was it with Chris? I think. From what I remember.
I don't have money to upgrade that shit. Right, okay.
I was going to leave that, but it would have been too mean. Asher, see, you're just too nice. Too nice. Right, we're just waiting on you then. Oh, you're right there. Okay.
We owe you one.
We took your sweet time, Kirk.
Oh, I'm injured. Fuck.
It's almost time for Alpha Team to go in. Hurry,
So you are.
deal coordinates.
Roger that.
You just healed me as well.
I'm going on.
I think if we're close enough to each other, we can heal, which is nice.
Ah, that's actually pretty sweet. Right. Happy days. Maybe we should look about. There might be some loot about here before we go.
That is exactly what I'm doing. Books, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it.
Ah. Books is lovely. Ah, bollocks.
I
don't be
know.
shit.
I know Books is lovely. I have been in Books' stream before.
Yeah.
I know.
She's kind enough to stop by mine quite often.
The
as
only
well.
thing I could, the only
is lovely.
downside about Books is she likes you, which, you know, is a serious
I
judge of
do
the
secretly
character.
like me. So there's that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Ah, well, you're streaming with me, you weirdo. We shared a bed together in Waffle's wedding, so there's
We
that.
didn't. There was
we did.
4 beds, the 3 of us,
See, you keep saying that.
and Niall was
That's
in a
not what
separate
happened,
room.
and you know it.
That's
You
exactly what
keep saying
happened.
that. You keep denying it.
I will continue to
Like
do
you
that.
can tell the truth. It's okay. This is a safe space. You can tell the truth. It's
The
okay.
only thing I'm taking away from that, and the thing I know for certain, is I snore less than McKinnon's.
Oh, that couldn't be hard. That's ridiculous.
Too much info. Legolas. He's telling lies. Sweet little lies. Who was the
I
big
am
spoon?
not.
Hook was the big spoon. Hook
Oh,
7
me,
foot
of
3.
course. 7 foot. Plus.
We'll have a look. So I couldn't stream much last weekend. Oh, no way.
It's been one hell of a weekend. What have you been up to?
Sister in chat, stop. My sister isn't in chat. What are you talking about? Although my sister did call into my chat once, and I didn't even recognize her username, and I was like, who the fuck's this?
It was the time you were dressed up as a woman. I'm looking for loot here in case you're wondering what I'm
I
doing.
wasn't. It was right. It was a bit Janice Battersby looking. Yes, I'll admit that. Right.
But, right, there's not much about here. So I think we just go down this way and continue on.
You. We're in a
Oh,
sewer.
no, never mind. We do not. Up the ways.
It's me. I'm ready as my sister. That's true. She's my sister. He's my sister. He's my sister from another mister.
I wonder.
Right.
Is there
Why
options
couldn't we?
to
Why
remap the
could?
controls?
Why couldn't we just open that gate?
I know, or jump over it. You know. Right, I'm assuming it's down this hole.
Right. Is it? It said to open
no.
the gate. The big red gate that just went up there.
Never mind. I just found it. It's alright. 400. I'm rich.
I know. Wet socks. I know. Tell
I
me
was
about
up exams, but I have all the feedback to type up. But I'm behind because my cat decided to scare me to death and had to rush into emergency vets with all sorts of issues. Ah, feck. Is he
Just-
okay now, though?
it. Just right for all the feedback has potential. Could do better. Some Wayne sitting there at A star. Could do better. Has potential.
Right. Is it? Nope.
Come on!
You just closed that door, my fizz.
I didn't.
Should
I
be
opened it. I opened it in your face.
I've immediately
Ah,
started
fuck
just
it.
taking whatever ammo I find, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. All kind of manners has gone out the window now.
Yep. Doesn't take long. Happy Irishman was right, as usual.
Yeah, this is true. He was right about Monster Hunter. He's right about this. Hope the cat's
Well.
okay on the men that grubby shaving, and now the bank account is empty. They do that. They choose that your pet will look at you and go, "Oh, you've a bit of extra money. I think I might just eat
I'm gonna
this
steal
rock."
it all. He had a blocked bladder, something wrong with his man parts, and they said he got early onset arthritis, but he's made it to 10, and this is the first health scare he's ever had, but it cost me £230. And vets just know how to charge, don't they? Oh, but I'm glad he's okay though. That's the main thing, like, because honestly, like, as Leyoric knows with Cleo, pets are like, they're the favourite child, is the best way to describe them.
Oh yeah, more important than my actual kids.
Oh yeah. How did you do that?
You shoot them in the leg, they stun them, and then just run up and
Yeah.
kick them.
So what's kick?
X or
X. Oh,
are you
do get the
PlayStation
prompt?
controller or Xbox?
Xbox controller, yeah.
Then X.
The champ! Do you copy? The champ!
Oh,
Not
shot
like
him in the
that.
kneecap and he died. Didn't get the chance.
Typical Northern Irishman. Kneecap and bice.
There we go. Got it.
Literally just got my car back on the road as well. Oh, the aiming is horrendous.
That's it happens. They always say, the old superstitious people say it comes in threes, don't they? There's that. Right, where are we going? Oh, shit.
My kids tend to do this thing where they will wait until...
You finish your sentence.
Yeah, sorry, I was just stabbing some guy. They'll normally wait until the very last minute and then tell me about the really expensive thing that they forgot to tell me about, and I'm like, all right, I didn't tell you about it, but there's a trip I'm looking to go on, and it's £1 million.
Hook, how do I turn off the hook bot? Is it annoying you? I can turn it off if you like, because I've been thinking about it.
Saves a lot of ammo, honestly, picking this game when you and your partner combo the shit out of zombies.
That's a good tip, actually.
I don't know where my partner is. He's kind of wandered off a wee bit.
But a shot in the dick. Yeah, I'm around the corner.
What corner?
Bring up your map. Press RB. He's alive? What the fuck? Oh, fuck off, man. Fuck, for God's sake. Did he get me? No.
You dead
Fuck, I
again?
had to reload. What's the reload in this game?
It's
That probably took about 6 bolts.
aim and then A.
Aim and A. Right, okay, thank you. Get my fucking head on.
You just
every time I
stole
run
my
out of
money,
bullets.
you prick.
I did. Aye. Aim and A, X, thank you, Asher. Saves a lot of ammo, and is honestly the peak of this game when you combo. Can also melee when they're on the floor like that. Yeah, that stomp was the first time I've done that. That's pretty cool. Right, hold on. Let me turn off the hook bot, because I've been thinking about that for a while. I mean, like the automatic replies as well.
Oh, right. So when I ask you like 7 times to do it, you don't even take me on. But as soon as your sister asks, can you
I put
turn
it on
off
chat
the bot?
many
Straight
times.
away.
And I was like, do you want
I'm
to turn
going
it
to
off?
turn it off now.
And everybody's like,
Crack.
no, it's fine. Leave it alone.
We
It's
all
okay.
know now your sister's your favourite
Stop
out of
lying.
between me and her.
Well, that's true.
Who needs money when you're having fun? This is true.
Took no end of the controls. I don't. I feel stressed. I should have checked out the game before I went live. Right, let's
Oh,
see.
I'm getting a raid.
Oh, nice. Okay. I'll hide.
Flim flam bamalam.
Blim, blam, bam, blam.
Flamash,
Flamash.
what is happening? It's okay. I'll be at the wedding. Make sure the cat knows who they... Flamash, what is the story? How did you get on with the rest? You were playing Dead by Daylight there. You were playing Still Wakes the Deep. I think that's the name of it. All I kept thinking about was that bad joke I made.
Flemish, welcome
We
on. Good to see you.
bump away.
In the jungle.
Oh, amazing. What is the crack? No, just wanted to see some of this before I go to sleep. Finished it? Yeah. Yeah, I was there for that. It was just Dead by Daylight. You were playing them whenever I came back in. What
I seen you
is
live
the
earlier, but I
story?
didn't get to stop by. Apologies.
Nah, your jokes are all good, New York. And I thank you. Thank you for that. I was going to stop the jokes, but then you did that for me. Right. I'm quickly going to go over to my Hall of Fame because Flamash
for it.
rated me.
I'm standing still. Go for it.
You're still on here, Hook. I added you in the Hall of Fame. Your face
Oh,
is
sweet, okay.
stuck on the wall. So I managed to get this all taken off Stream Elements and put on StreamerBot, and it actually looks a wee bit better now. And it automatically stores them all instead of me having the manual do it, which is nice. One of the rare occasions I get on it. Yeah, I'm never on
You're
a
welcome.
Sunday night.
You're welcome.
Why am I welcome?
No, Flemish is welcome. You
All right.
idiot.
Thought
You're
you
on
were
the Sunday night
you were-
because of me.
I thought you were taking credit for me figuring out how to change it over.
Oh, no. The fact that you're gracing a Sunday night.
Ah, right, okay. It is the best jokes. It is the best jokes, and Hook keeps being nasty about it.
I'm not being nasty. You're the one who keeps giving me grief.
You keep giving me dirty looks every time I tell one of my amazing jokes.
Amazing. Exactly, Books. Exactly. Can I break the TV? Okay. Right. No option to stomp there.
I shot her in the boot.
Oh, there's a chest here.
Right, good luck. Going to bed, because... No worries, Asher. Thank you very much for coming on.
Asher, all the best. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you coming on, because I know obviously Resi is your jam. But have a good night. Look after yourself. Much love.
Strawberry is my jam. I can hear your head waggle.
You trying to say my head's big?
No, I could just hear you disapproving waggle. Raspberry's peak. Raspberry's good. Raspberry's good.
Raspberry is the best, actually. Right. This way? Yeah. Oh, I need you to help me open this door.
See?
because-
Girl power. Did you hear about the cleaner? She went to space, ended up scrubbing the mission. Hey!
Hey!
Blackcurrant all the way. And a jam. And a jam.
Tomahawk,
I don't know.
what's happening? Right, so we need to rescue your one. Tomahawk, welcome in, dude. All right, my
I am
friends, good to see
snoozing
you.
some ads here as well, Hook.
Oh, no worries. No worries at all. When are my ads? 4 minutes? I'm alright yet.
And we need a
Blackcurrant all the
key.
way. Or jam.
Oh, we need a key for this.
Raspberry.
Although there's a ladder. Did I just use the ladder? You know, I can only use a step ladder. I never knew my real ladder. I don't know why there's a ladder going to this roof. There's fuck all up here.
To be fair, I
Well,
have to
maybe-
say you're both great crack. I dipped into the stream the other day there. Oh, you mean Sierra and Flemish? They're lovely. Absolutely
why-
lovely.
why-
You tell Flemish, mind you. But Sierra's a dude.
I
Flemish
kicked the
doesn't
la-
need it.
Look, I kicked the ladder down. I don't know why.
I see that. Can I push you?
No, we can't. I'm a lady.
Lady Smeedy.
Oh, we raised
Oh,
it
you
up
can
like
lift it back
Westlife. You raise me up. There's a chicken.
Can't get in that way. Don't kick a chicken, whatever you do.
Can I lick the chicken? Chicken licking.
Well, I'm sure you could, but you make it sick.
I'm assuming that includes me. Look at this graph. Big boss, what's happening?
Big boss wants a crack.
Westlife, you mean? Ah, Tomahawk. Excellent. Excellent. I like it.
What? Clever.
Hey, what's wrong?
She's probably infected.
Solid snake.
Get those raccoons. I will.
No.
I guess this is Raccoon City 4 as well, by the way. Anybody not keeping up with the story? This is the 4th time Raccoon City's been recreated.
Mute. Mute.
You two are going steady now. No, this
Right,
is Africa
good
1.
shooter.
I bet it's still Raccoon City.
Oh, I just broke her arm. Shot her in the hip.
Oh, that's one of them. Oh, fuck. Didn't see his boy come behind me.
Big boss, what is happening? What a fantastic walk on. Shit, I've no ammo. Oh, we're fecked here. The one and only big boss. What is the crack? I need ammo. Who's an ammo?
Finding Leyoric in a
Ah, Ian, what's happening? Well, it's because revealed and shaved,
shall we say the
shaved head Omar.
bad in Canto.
Ian, what is happening?
You'll usually find
Here,
someone
this door opens.
making bad
Oh.
jokes, you know?
Oh, ammo.
Yeah, but like
All right, we're in the middle of shenanigans.
Yeah. Can't really pause this either, which is a bit of a nightmare.
something like that, you know?
This lady is being silly.
Sheva here. Roger that.
Shiva, Mr. Lover Man. Shiva.
I feel like we can't. Oh, she's dead. I was about to say, I feel like we can't kill her. Never mind, she's dead. Right, reload. Right, I
Up
think
the
we're
lads.
okay.
Thank God you said
Second.
lads there now, otherwise we could have got very, very bad.
Ian, what is the crack? Welcome on, good sir. Good to see you. Right, my ads are starting in about a
Been on
minute.
PC? Yes, we are. Mostly
trying
because
to
I
read
couldn't
my
actually
chat.
find any console versions of the game. I went up to CX the other day and they had fuck all.
Yeah, you were texting about that the other day, and I was like, I think I own it in Steam. So,
Your
I wouldn't
man
mind playing
Weskers
it
is
on
it?
console.
Yes, he is. He is. Or as he was called earlier in chat, Westcliff.
So Wesker's in this then? Right, okay. Where, fill me in story-wise, where is this based versus the other Resident Evil games?
So this is Raccoon City 5. So they keep
Right.
blowing up and recreating Raccoon City.
Aye, of course, because it's like a time paradox. That's right.
Yeah, it's like Terminator or
Aye.
Loop Theory and Silent Hill.
Of course.
FPS? He was trying to write for fuck's sake and he wrote FPS. You're a silly sausage. This is in Africa.
Yeah, no.
You know, I once went to Kenya on like a trip. You know, in between, it was like a gap year thing, and I got a job on a farm where the actual ropes of the horses. Like the leather would actually get really, really cracked in the heat, so I used to spray them with water to keep them cool. I missed the rains down in Africa.
I was wondering where you're going with that. That was long-winded.
It was.
I respect that. I respect
was.
that one. I respect
I
that
liked
one.
it,
That
though.
was good. 7 minutes. Books was counting. It took 7 minutes. You couldn't help yourself. Couldn't help yourself.
That was a journey. Hey!
Hey!
Hey, just
Even
don't
though
stop
school did
believing.
that, but sure.
It was bumpy for sure. What was the one I heard the other day and I thought was quite funny? Guy is walking past a farm. He sees a farmer standing at the edge of his property with a dog. And he walks up to him and says, "Oh, can I speak to your dog?" And the boy's all, "Ha, you can walk away, but the dog doesn't talk." So he turns around to the dog and he says, "Oh, how are you? How are you getting on?" And the dog goes, "Getting on grand. And, this farmer's really nice to me, takes me out and all, gives me the best treats." Farmer's fucking shocked. He's like, "My God." Boy turns around and says, "Oh, there's a cow in your field. Can I talk to your cow?" He's all, "What? Cow doesn't talk." He's all, "Hello, cow. How are you?" And the cow goes, "Oh, I'm doing grand. I'm out here. It's fresh grass. I can eat whatever I want. It's nice and sunny." And the farmer takes me in when it rains. Farmer is absolutely flabbergasted. Boy turns around and he says, "Oh, now that we've done that, can I go over there? I see a sheep in your field. Can I talk to your sheep?" And farmer goes, "Ah, fuck. That sheep's a fucking liar."
Also good. I respect the fact that it took so long. I'm in ads at the moment.
You're an
So I'm
ads?
kind of
See,
dwindling.
I snoozed.
Aye.
Everybody leave Hook Street.
I've changed scene here.
We'll wait here.
for a
We'll
second.
chat for 5. We'll chat for 5. You like the chat, don't you?
100%, because I feel like I've been ignoring these chats, so sorry about that.
I like
It's
how
just the
can I
game's
go
been
back
so
screen?
intense
I'll
and
go
you
back
can't
screen.
pause.
I'll go back screen.
You know what? It's probably a good thing you can't pause, because we wouldn't get this game completed if you could, because I'd be pausing constantly. The
I
chat.
do it quite a bit when I'm
So-
playing as well, which is whenever I want to tell a story. I keep doing it. Sorry, around the shop when you're getting on Resident Evil yet. The evils are getting residented. We've issued them
Resident Evil.
all.
They have like a fucking bug in their mouth, whatever that's all about. Now, I was asking about it earlier, but it probably is a spoiler, so
It's
probably
kind
don't
of the same as
answer it.
RE4 though, isn't it? It's the same sort of
Aye.
whippity slashity thing.
Aye, like especially like the old floppy head ones. Like that's kind of like an RE4 as well.
Right.
Bye, Hooked.
We're leaving. Leyoric has
leaving.
spoken.
Well, what can I do? He's coming. Look at him streaming on a Sunday night and taking over.
Same thing as
What a
RE4, the Parasite. See, Palmish doesn't like you, Hook. That's why he called you Parasite. He agreed
So-
it was from the thing from RE4, and he's all, "Yeah, Parasite." We're getting deep lore. Fucking right.
We're getting it. Exactly. So a serious question actually about the lore.
Laura,
so-
Laura Croft.
That Parasite then obviously is the same thing as in Resident Evil 4.
Yes.
So is this based after Resident Evil 4 at the same time in a different location?
Lore wise, the actual all the viruses are based off a plant in Africa.
Right.
So I
It's
think there was
after.
3 people years ago went to Africa, and they all kind of went off in their own various ways, and from that came the Parasite and T virus and the G virus.
Right, okay. Thank you for not making a fucking tutu joke there. And when you says Africa, I was always going to make another joke.
I already made
appreciate
that joke. I already did that.
I know, but it wouldn't like you to make a different variation of it.
I'm not going to repeat the same joke on the same day. I
You
mean,
mentioned at the start it's similar to the incident from the Kennedy report, references RE4. Right, the cutscene at the start, I was perplexed by the fact that I couldn't invite Leyoric. So I can't.
Big Boss, is this the one from Skynet? It is. We still
That's
have
not
to we still have to find the time machine, travel back in time, and shag Sarah Connor.
Speaking of Skynet and Terminator, did anyone know this, right? So,
Well, this
Dragon
game
Ball,
essentially
best
starts
anime
with-
ever made.
but there's more later on.
and Terminator 2. So, Akira Toriyama based Trunks and Bulma and Android 16, etc., off of Terminator 2. So, Android 16 was like a parody of the T800, Arnie. John Connor was Trunks. And
Tomahawk,
Bulma,
you're right.
Bulma's arc at that time was Sarah Connor, which I didn't even know until like the other day. Yeah, it's actually true. He was quoted talking about it as well, that that's where he got the inspiration from. And obviously Goku was like I can't remember what it is in that the Chinese mythology, where it's like The Monkey King, I think they called him, with the tail. Like
Yeah.
Black Myth Wukong was based off of it, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
Like that story. Goku's obviously a variation
It's
of that.
Android 18. He's RoboCop's cousin. Yes. Yes.
RoboCop's cousin. You know what I think about Terminator, don't you? I see. The one person I expect to have a strong opinion on Terminator and never does is Flemish, which is really surprises me.
That man, no, I don't know. You're giving him grief. That man doesn't have strong opinions. He's
Well, that's
very
true.
lackadaisical, just goes with the flow and just, you know,
Aye.
don't start him. Is he vibrating in his chair as we speak? Is he going, "Arr, anger? Is he typing into his own chat? Exclamation mark, complaint plus.
No, just on a whim the odd time though. He might have
whim?
the opinion. I might just on a whim.
Whim away, a whim away, away. I'm having too much fun with this.
Well, this game initially established the Plant from Africa was part of it. There's more later about it, right? Okay, that's why earlier on I was like, if it's a spoiler, don't tell me.
High-end luggage.
But for what we
I can even
understand
add
so
you to
far,
my
I was confused
collection.
because I must have caught saying at the start, basically. So that's on me.
Collection of skin luggage.
But right,
Of
okay.
course I'm not deep.
So
Don't
it's
be
similar to
ridiculous.
RE4.
Look at the smell.
Perfect. Thank you.
You
Right,
haven't
the ads
found
are
the
reversed
smell,
switch
you
back.
bitch!
Yeah, I kind of messed
Really
up
rock?
playing at the start as well. Hold on a wee second.
Oh, that's right. No worries. You're grand. You can let me know when you're right. I feel better now that I've caught up with you a bit. You know what it is? I didn't get me 45 minutes of yapping before getting into the game. Threw me off.
You didn't do that with Final Fantasy either, which
That's
I find
because the
really
game's so
refreshing.
long, though. Scared the shit out of me, books. The game is so long. That's why.
That was suspenseful.
Just a bit.
All Hook's chatting's been denied. He's about to explode. He is. Per
Exactly.
Mrs.
Tomahawk, you helped last night.
Per
You helped.
Mrs. Hook is going to be distraught tonight when she has to listen to him talk for 2 hours.
Fact. Absolute fact.
Love the part in
I'll come
Terminator
off the
where
stream,
across
she'll be like,
such judgment right with the help of the T800 virus. That's his favorite. That's Flemish's favorite part.
What's
Yes.
your favorite? What's your
In the
favorite
dungeon.
part, Flemish?
So lurking for a bit. Ooh, back to 14. Great latency. For sake, he's
In a
got a
dungeon?
surplus of it last night. Oh no. He can never wish to. He has unlimited chat.
I am, to be fair. I could chat all day. I just got a wee bit overwhelmed at the start of this because the game is so chaotic, and I was like, I just want to chat.
When
Alright.
is ever like you can be overwhelmed and underwhelmed, but does anyone ever describe themselves as just being whelmed? I feel whelmed today.
I suppose people probably do. This is
This is
bullying. What's
bullying.
bullying? If you mean Leyoric being mean to me, I'm used to it. That's just what he does.
So that guy just lay down. He's from
Is that, seen
Alpatine.
that?
There's nothing we can do for it. We didn't even check his pulse. We just assumed he's dead.
You can investigate him.
I don't do that. I just read it out.
Oh, I thought you were just making that up. I did.
How dare you, sir?
Right, there's a ladder which
I
isn't going
think
to
if-
lead to good things.
We're close enough. Whenever one of us gets resources, we both kind of get it. Shouldn't we,
really?
just to make sure? We're too far away. I wouldn't waste the ammo on him.
I don't think he can share ammo or money. Sorry.
Yeah, whenever it gives us both money there.
Oh, you're right, it does. But ammo is separate.
Sexist.
Jesus,
I need a
Derek.
big strong man to kick down the door.
No, I couldn't do it on
thoroughly
my own
whelmed.
later
I
on.
know,
You had to be there
I know.
too.
I think we should say it more. We should say whelmed more. Teddy, what's happening? How are you both?
Teddy.
Awesome.
What is the crack?
Teddy's proud to be bald. He's on my team. Dreamer Man, casual hunting. That we have to sub and cheer for both. No subs necessary. Not at all. Watching Mortal Kombat 2 last night.
No subs are necessary.
Well,
Right.
Mortal Kombat
They're
was pretty
grand.
good. Me, Hook, and McKenna still have to go see that. When's McKenna's back from Australia?
This week.
This week.
No. Yeah.
You might
I
be
think
dead.
Wednesday. I think. And then we have a wedding on Saturday that we're both going to.
And I wasn't invited.
Yeah. Take it up with my mate Gav.
Hey, hang in there.
Don't make the joke. Don't. I know what you're thinking.
Did I ever tell you about my friend Gavin who died from heartburn?
I
Can't
saw
believe
some,
Gav is gone.
but they ran away.
Game audio is very low on mine. I'll pump it up. Got to bump it up.
The data, but Alpha Team is down. Irving got away.
Looks like you're doubling over the dialogue.
Roger. Relay the data from the vehicle.
Tumbling over the dialogue. Brilliant. The streamer man casually hitting the... No. Watch Mortal Kombat
They've
2
done
last
Johnny
night for
Cage
MK film.
reasonably
It's actually
well.
pretty good.
Ooh. I enjoy Carl Urban, and everything is. Oi! Ewy!
Carl
Homelander
Urban
done
is good.
killed my wife and stole me bloody kid. Brilliant. Brilliant. Greatest accent of all time.
Right.
Love my deck. We all love our deck. Want to sit in my deck?
Steam Deck's amazing. I use the Steam Deck when I'm streaming. You know, it's on right now in front of me. It has my bot account on it, so I can see the stream from like a viewer's point of view.
He's V-button. It's official. He's V-button.
One view. I've done that from the start, and the reason I did it at the very start when I started streaming is because I wouldn't be streaming the zero.
Fatality. You can't. I'm back. We're finished it. Yes, we are. We finished the game. Speed running it. We sped ran it. We sped ran it.
Where the fuck did you go? Legolas?
Chris Phantom,
How dare
thank you very much for checking in.
Come on! Come on!
I'm here. I'm beside you.
I'm pressing the button.
Jesus. I have a bad gambling addiction. Pokemon cards. I was the same in Magic the Gathering. I have shitloads of Magic the Gathering cards. They were phenomenal. The Final Fantasy
there's
ones were my jam.
That's what I was about to say. There's some cracker ones, and you got me into the and then I got into the Dragon Ball ones.
Put Jacob to
Which are
bed, but I'm back, baby. Who's Jacob?
Oh, my nephew, Jacob.
Ah, right.
Ah, okay. No worries, Legolas. There's no joking, by the way. Of course, you can leave.
Ooh.
You're not here against the wall anymore.
The Ledger, level 21 party at the moment, hey, for the boss
Oh,
at the end of the
shit.
stream.
I think tonight's the night. But it might be.
Could be. I can't even remember what the health is of that zombie. Not zombie. Boss.
Such devastation.
You should hear what they're saying about you in Hook stream.
Not my intention.
I wouldn't be
Oh, God.
surprised.
Teddy,
like
how did
80
you do
quid.
that to your name?
Nice.
You know
What
how,
their name?
like, look at Teddy's username. It's like multicolored. That's pretty cool. Can you not see it?
No. It's probably...
70
call it?
Group.
That's what I'd say.
That's pretty cool. I like that.
See, the app or not the app, but the dock I use for my chat doesn't have 7TV in it, but my actual browser does.
Ah, right, okay. I think, yeah, I'm using the OBS dock. That's... yeah, I'm using the OBS dock. You can enable 7TV as well. This guy's going to come alive, I'm telling you.
I go back a ways. Fucking dad. It'd be yellow if it didn't have
Hold on,
7TV
hold
in
on.
it.
This way? I think there's a door down here we need to check out. Yeah, that one.
So, where Dora explores. There was a door as well earlier that we need a key for, and I don't think we ever did find the key.
No, I think that was optional.
I guess
Yeah, that's the guy I was saying I think is going to come alive.
I just shot him in the head. He can't be coming alive now. Look, that'd be rude.
Oh. Right, so we need to turn off that gas then. Ah, shit, there's gas canister. There's a couple of gas canisters. That means enemies.
Yeah. It's like, remember the Gears of War games and you would see the barriers and you all, there's just going to be fights in here.
You just knew. Yeah, in that universe, there's barriers everywhere. Doesn't matter where you go. Barriers.
Right, we can go in here. Oh, do we have to lure something in here and try and kill it?
Oh, it's an incinerator, is it?
Yeah. Oh, we have a furnace key.
Oh, nice. Like, that'll be that door then. Oh, there's a herb.
It will be in furnace. In furnace.
This house. Right, so
Why don't you
have the
stop
key
being
bit
so
of-
negative? You're negative, Nelly. Thank you for shouting,
not
folks. Not a
negative.
problem. Anybody not following Teddy, follow Teddy. Because he's a great
Definitely.
arse. That's why you follow him. Yeah, at this point,
Well-
the universe they've been fighting a horde for years. What a weird way to hold a key.
What the fuck is that?
What the hell is that?
Exactly. Just stand there. Run.
Ew. Ew. Ew.
I think that's what got Alpha Team.
What one? Right, so that's what we have to
Stare.
learn to do.
Oh, monster. Looks gross. It does.
It does, does it?
But that's just my face, Tash. There's nothing I can do about it.
Run.
They're running. They're running.
Oh, I.
You've already run away and left me. Fucking hero there, hey.
If you leave me now. Right. We need to try and lure it into the furnace.
Well, I walk back, Andy. There's a thing chasing us, and I think we have to murder it. Yeah.
I think so. Oh shit. It's not the sun. Is this a tower? Lure them here. No, I'll go around there.
Is there a switch for it?
Aye. Get to follow you in there.
Okay, it's in there.
Let me know when you're out.
I'm out. Close up.
Shit.
Oh, we fucked it. You were too slow.
You were too slow.
Oh, it's really slow.
Hold on, where'd it go? I think we got it. Oh, it didn't. Shit. Another step. Is that done yet? No. Oh, shit. The door's open behind me.
Right, we have to lure it back on now.
Actually, it's right behind me. Nothing I can do.
Can you press the button?
I will now.
I think it's got back outside again. Shit.
It takes too long. There's like a 30-second wait. Is what it feels like.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Right, I'm sprinting around here again. Try and keep it on there for a second if you can.
I can't even push the button yet.
Shit, it's back out, it's back out.
Shit, got me. Get good, losers. I'm trying.
Come on!
Baby.
Oh, thank you. Right, we'll go round the other way.
Yeah, is
Where
it
is it?
following you?
No.
Where is it?
Oh, it's reforming beside us.
Now's the time.
Go push, push.
I pressed.
He's already out.
You get it? Fuck! It's impossible now. Oh, fuck.
It's not impossible. We'll do it. Right, maybe it's a bit impossible because I have no ammo. Right idea, wrong execution. Fuck off, Grimash. I'll fight you. I'll fight you. I'll go back in time and fight you. Damn, this teamwork is seamless. I know it is. Oh, I have no ammo. Shit.
It has aggro too, so I'm going to close the fall around.
Right, push the button.
I'm pressing it. Get out, look. Get out. Come on, dude. I think I got it.
There we go, we got him.
Jesus. Are you a leprechaun? There. It'll be yellow if you don't have the 7 TV letter. Ah.
Unless there's a phase 2, then no.
Is that a parent there? Or something like that? Because it has like the bulging eye parts, is what I'm wondering about.
Did it drop anything
As
good?
soon as you shot, you should have knocked him over. He absorbs them. You lure him in there, shoot the canister, and that stuns him. Ah, right, okay. So we did it inadvertently. Like,
It died the way it looked, trying to make friends. I know, it was just trying to help us.
it's classed as a mutation. Right, okay.
No, but my mommy said I was pretty.
Most things are infected with the jank, even the machines. Yes, especially the control scheme and the machines in this game, yes. You good losers.
Right, so now we can open this door? Use key.
Yes, with that key, that's right, yep.
How are you with ammo? I only have my submachine gun.
Not too bad, actually. Let me see. No, I'm alright. I found
Another
somewhere
hall
not
with
that
another
one.
dead guy.
I do need aid, though.
Oh, we have ammo. Loads of ammo.
Ah, sweet. Right, is this a
Actually,
safe room?
actually, it's not even loads of ammo. It's a bit of ammo. You mind if I
I'll
take
take it.
another one?
No, go for it.
And you grab that one.
Yep, sweet.
Why can't I walk through him?
I could.
Hello. Got my speed run done in Requiem. 2 hours 15. Nice one.
No way. Well done. That's amazing. I wonder what the record is.
Actually,
Are you-
I know he was giving a shout out earlier whenever he came on the chat. But if any aren't falling flummish, he's doing a charity stream this Saturday. It's a 12-hour stream, and he's going to be playing Requiem and Insanity mode. Definitely give him a follow and check that out. And also just go on just to give him grief.
Loves the Lion King, by the way.
Let's go.
Loves the Lion King, knows all the songs. Here,
Just Plague Doctor.
I know.
Are you going to speedrun more Resi 2?
Yes.
Got it.
For clarity, I won't be completing Insanity mode. I'm just trying to get through it without
was
infinite
that
weapons.
thing?
All right, okay. But I am
That
corrected.
scumbag Irving left
Basically,
behind
all my
to set
suffering
us
will be for
up.
charity.
Considering what
It's a
it
bit-
did
that's
to
the only
Alpha
way.
Team, I think we're lucky to still be breathing.
Only we
I'm
could have
currently playing
gotten
on
there
Saturday.
sooner.
Love a knife. No.
If we had,
Fair play to you,
we'd
Chrissy.
probably be dead too. Chris to HQ, do you copy?
This is HQ. Excellent work out there. We'll analyze the data immediately.
This whole town's gone to hell.
All
The
suffering
people
is
here,
good
they're
suffering
acting like
if
those
you enjoy it.
Ganado detailed in the Kennedy report. And aside from that, there's something
Like
new,
tattoos?
something we've never encountered before.
Our transportation
Look, did
has
you
been
show
taken
everybody
out
your
too.
tattoo yet?
Requesting a mission update.
I don't think so.
The mission stands.
It's a bit awkward to show on stream. I think I have a photo.
Get naked. Just get naked.
Mines on the other side of the train station.
Wait,
I think I have a photo. I'll send it
we're
on
the
the
only two
Discord.
left. You want us to go in there alone?
Oh, Legolas is a great idea.
Dispatched and they're on their way.
Well,
I mean, I might do a game on Insanity, but there's no way I'm doing the 12
Wait,
hours.
we
Not a
can't.
chance.
Your mission stands.
See this tattoo? That's what it is.
Don't let 'em get away. Proceed
It's an energy sword from Halo, and then whenever he gets excited
This
about
is
something, it goes
insane.
boo. You got a wee thing installed just for the sound effect.
Expendable.
Oh, that was a shield noise I made. I'm a
you
noob.
did, dumbass. Wasn't letting you away with that. Right, where is it?
Look at that.
Yeah,
A rank,
posted it in
both
the
of us.
photos on Discord.
Absolute legends, a pair of us.
Right, one of us. One of us. I might do the game insanely, but there's no way. There's no way you're doing
Down
that
a
for 12
dungeon.
hours.
Had to make that joke. Nice one. Nice one. Well, say I appreciate it. Hook, do you mind if I take a quick break and go for a pee?
No, not at all. I'll do the same. Yeah.
So, for anybody in my chat, see the actual voting game that we had on the break? I've managed to get that changed over now, the streamer bot. So it looks different, and I've added more games to it as well. So it's exclamation mark vote 1 for the first one, exclamation mark vote 2 for the second, and I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah.
Or
Are you
3.
running ads? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll do the same, so we're synced up then that way. I'll go
Happy
back.
days.
So back in a moment, folks.
Wait.
Roll up, bring your flame. Set the bracket, call the You in my
Very nice indeed.
Back again.
Hello, hello, hello. I was just
Ghost
saying,
of- Ghost of
on my
Tsushima
stream here,
won.
you could see behind the scenes. Like you were in your BRB screen. But we could all see your face here.
Ah, I never even thought of switching that off while I was away.
For next week.
To be fair,
I'll
it probably would
I'll
have
have
been
a
the
button set
same.
up.
It probably would have been the same the other way right on mine, but because my BRB doesn't have any of our cameras on it, that probably is why.
Yeah.
You changed the song. I
fair
did
enough, sir.
change the song. I did change the song.
You changed the song?
I changed the
What?
song. I sent it to you like 3 days ago.
Oh, that's the song, right? Okay. I thought you were using that for the start of the stream or something.
No,
Right.
no,
okay.
not that song. That song I used for the start of the stream. I sent you in ready the video with the new voting system, and I had the new
Oh,
song
you
on
did.
it.
Aye, of course you did. Right. Okay.
I don't
My
like
bad,
it, but
my
I'll
bad.
accept it. It needed to be refreshed. Like that other song. I've had that for like fucking
Man, Vote of
year?
Kings got stuck in my head every time I played, and Mrs. Hook if I was watching your stream.
I did, but it wasn't a very good AI song. I could see about halfway through the song, if you listened, it started messing up in its own words and started just mumbling stuff.
Just gibberish.
Just gibberish. And a lot of the older AI ones were kind of like that, where it
Tell me
just
what you
wouldn't do it
want.
properly.
Some
Sweet
of the
and
stuff now
gentle.
is like the one that you made for this
Excuse
stream.
me?
Oh, it's a
No.
banger. It's a fucking
Oh.
What do
banger.
you say?
I even played
Right
it for
up
my
my
son.
street.
I even played it for my son.
No.
He's like, that's really
No.
Aye.
I'm not going to give you a
It's
treat
actually
if you
really
call me
good. I
that.
will more in Vote of Kings.
What do you say?
I agree, Tomahawk.
The other song's still sitting there. I've already forgotten the new one. Pokemon Next.
Man,
Pokemon Next,
Vote of
Leyoric,
Kings
please.
is a classic.
What do
You
you
know
mean
what you need
Pokemon
to do,
Next?
actually?
You-
I have an
no.
idea.
Legolas is saying Pokemon Next. What do you mean, do you play? I've never played a Pokemon game on stream. Actually,
Pokemon Next?
is that what you're saying, Legolas? If they play a Pokemon game? Hold on, the doggy has to get a treat first.
Go for it. You're grand. How do you make it so good, all the other ones? I mean, are shit.
Leo!
What do you mean, Pokemon games, Legolas? All to play. Yeah, the modern Pokemon games, like, I know not everyone in chat's going to agree, but they're shit. For
No,
how, they're shit for
Arceus
how
was good.
rich Pokemon is as an IP. No, I'm
Pokemon-
sorry, the potential. Like, the potential that you can have.
That Legends
Pokemon
Arceus
games.
was great. It was a phenomenal game. Leo, what'd you get? What'd you get?
Oh,
You get a treat?
you mean songs? What? Grant, what's happening? Ew, I love that you're playing this one. Have a blast, you guys. Sexy, welcome. And
Oh,
see you.
song-wise, right, okay.
song-wise, right? I thought you meant games, Legolas. Right, okay.
Sexy, what's happening? Yeah,
Good
we're
to see
having
you,
fun
my
with it. We're starting to get the hang of the controls a wee bit, I think, now.
Aye. It was a bit ropey at the start there, I have to admit, but I'm alright with it now. I've bedded on it now, I think. I think I'm
Yeah.
good. Definitely. Right, we jump back on it then?
Yep.
Sounds good. Right, really rock. I think I need to tab into the game. Yeah. What the fuck was that?
I sneezed it.
Right, boys, gotta head off to bed. Have fun, my dudes. Kira, thank you very much for coming on and hanging out. Much appreciated, dude.
Very much so, Kira. Thank you. Did we give Kira a shout out? Those are my shout outs work in your stream as well because I'm a
I
mod.
see them. Aye. Yeah. They don't trigger shout out in my end, but I see them.
They just pop up in chat. Do they just?
Aye, they just pop up in chat, yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
Kira
But
plays
it's
a
shared chat
lot.
anyway, so
Akira plays a lot of games on retro hardware, and I think recently he's on about doing the old gun games from the PS1 era.
I'm
You
assuming
got that all set up?
Akira must have a CRT then.
He
Because
does.
like he needed a CRT for them.
Oh, I
Yeah. Class. Love it.
cathode ray tube.
Yep, cathode ray tube.
Dungeon
that's right.
done. I did,
You did that Saturday? Oh,
I wasn't on Twitch at all on Saturday.
I must go back and check it out. Must go back and check it out.
This game
Akira,
brings you together more than
I
it
love
takes
the original
two.
harbor.
You must just play in
Everything, down
Portal
to
2.
the
It was a
last
nightmare.
minute
Our Survivor was
details.
a lot of fun. Nice.
Nice.
I remember Time Crisis. That was my favorite light gun game. Love Time Crisis.
Ask Krakistan. Thank you very much for the follow. What a username.
Jesus.
Ask
I just heard
Krakistan.
it. Got my YouTube.
That's an amazing
Kira,
username.
100%. I'm definitely going to catch up. Peace out, no ball.
Right. All the best, dude. All the best. Look after yourself.
Right, I need
Up on
to.
YouTube. Nice.
Upgrade
I'll
my
organize
weapon.
my shit here while we're just yapping. Antique clock. Cell. Sure. And then ivory relief. Beautiful woman's blah blah blah. Impeccable cell. Sure. Right, I think I'm rich. I'm actually right. I have shotgun shells for no shotgun.
I cannot explain that. Hook.
Buy a shotgun, maybe?
Oh, I have treasures I can sell.
Aye, the clock and stuff. I think
Yeah.
we both can sell them, which is pretty cool. As we find them.
Yeah, happy days. There's
I
some.
love that. Yeah.
Does that mean I get to upgrade more? What, like, oh, give me
haven't
4
played-
grand. Nice one.
Many Pokemon games, but I'd love to see some Pokemon games, to be honest, on Twitch. You mean, Legolas? Right, okay. The original Pokemon games were fantastic. Now, I was harsh on the modern ones there. They are good. I just mean for the potential that they could do with the Pokemon games. I always feel a bit disappointed. Especially when you play other open world, similar style games, and you'd be like, this is class.
There's a shotgun in the shop.
Is there?
You can buy one.
There is. Fantastic. I shall buy that. Nice.
I don't know why I keep doing my Resident Evil kind of strategy where I completely upgrade my handgun.
Oh, it just makes sense.
It's one of them ones because you get so much handgun ammo normally in a game.
Yep.
like
I will
the-
go...
What? A bit of night in it?
You think so? I'm roasting. What is it in here? 23 degrees in this wee room here.
Yeah, wee bit in it.
No heat on, like. I am absolutely loaded. It's great.
I am skint to the month now.
Yeah, I'm spending it all now at this stage, to be fair.
I've just put it all on the upgrades.
Yeah, that is the way to do it. Right.
As it though, I don't think either one of us know enough about this game. What if like Asher or Flemish turns around and goes, "Oh no, upgrades are an absolute waste in this game. They do nothing."
I
You'd be
would
like,
say
"Oh,
fair
no
enough.
way."
Can argue with that. Right, I'm ready.
Oh my!
Right, so why to change weapon?
I think we need to explore and pick up some ammo.
Yes.
Get the first port of call.
Oh, right, there's not that.
Something
Weapon
up there,
box. Ooh. An MP5. Pardon me. Sorry, chat. Come in more. More for us.
Press B to call your partner.
Come on!
Okay. Come on!
Yay!
Roger, come on!
Okay.
Come on!
Okay. Come
Look
on!
at that. Teamwork. Teamwork makes the dream
Teamwork
work.
makes the dream work. Read
what's
document.
this?
While the item menu is displayed, press RB to confirm what item your partner has.
I noticed as well. You know that thing I was using for the Resident Evil 2 speedrunning?
Yes.
You can put it in here and it will show in co-op both the player's inventory and health and stuff. But I thought it would just...
Oh.
I don't need it because it kind of shows your ammo and health anyway on my screen, so it's a bit of a waste. But it was
Probably a
pretty
bit
cool.
cluttered too, but yeah. Like with 2 cameras and stuff, I mean. Where's the chest up here?
You can't put an MP5 in your iPod. 100% Teddy. You're right. You're right.
Folks,
You're right. Much
Anyone in chat
How'd you get up
doesn't
there?
know Teddy. Go on. Parkour. Go on, check him out. I love Teddy. He's an absolute dope. And he happens to be on a really good stream as well. Teddy is a good dude.
If you ever catch him on the weekends, he does an early morning like SMTV
Yeah.
Live one and all. Class.
Fantastic.
How did you get up there?
Around this way. I think you don't need to go up though, because I picked up the loot there, so you'll also have them as well. Up that way here.
Ah, there was a ladder. Never even seen it.
Yeah.
I want to
Oh,
go
yeah,
up here
it's
just for the
fine.
sake of going up here now. Means a lot
Yeah.
coming from you two. Appreciate you, Teddy. Thank you very
Not
much.
at all, Teddy. Honestly, like I don't really usually praise folks on stream unless like I genuinely mean it in a way.
Because he doesn't
I'll be
praise me
nice,
at all, and like that
you're
that says volumes.
Right. Look at that skybox. Fantastic.
That's
No,
one
it's
of
a
the worst skyboxes I've ever seen.
It's a bit grey. So
fuck you
I would
talking
say
about?
like here compared to the favelas we were looking at, that's pretty good. I would give it a 5. Give it a 5.
Rate my skybox. Oh,
You sure like John and Mary of Twitch? We are, but that's true. And I'm going to save my heavier weapons for bigger enemies, I think. Skybox is not the limit. See, Sexy gets it. He gets it. What did you just do there?
There was a man.
He's walking away.
There was a man.
I hear people running around us. It's so weird.
They're up above us in the containers. That's the
Oh.
one I shot earlier.
Got a crossbow.
Yeah, but it was okay because he had a chili before he came out here and didn't have an arrow. This part shouldn't be as annoying as it does, but the controls make it so. Right, okay.
Ah, right, okay. Because of the verticality from it.
Oh, he glassed me.
In the crouch. Herb. Oh, my inventory's full. There's a herb here where I am if you want it.
Why
Behind you.
is your inventory full? Right, hold on. I'm going to get this super fast.
Because I picked up enough items that my inventory got full.
I have shotgun ammo. Well, I suppose neither of us have a shotgun at the moment.
I
Where
have
are
a
you?
shotgun. I got it though. I think it went to me as well.
You buy the shotgun? I can give you the ammo.
Didn't
for it.
actually, I bought the shotgun now.
Um,
I think you can send to me.
Teamwork.
Thanks very much. Jump down. No, I don't want to jump down.
teamwork makes the dream.
Did you get that herb? Do you need it?
Oh, I didn't get a herb. Where was it?
Behind where the ladder was. So you might have to run around the outside again.
Behind where what was?
Run around here. Back around this blue container. And where you went
blue
up the ladder, it's behind where you went up the ladder.
Ah, in there. Right, okay. I'll
Yeah. Right, I'm assuming no, we're not opening that gate. I assume we're up. Oh,
Why'd I get the
okay.
feeling
Not
that
bad.
something big is going to come out? We
Oh,
can't
fact.
even crouch under these explosives. I would love to keep them there just to use them again later.
Come
Oh,
on!
explosives.
Can you crouch? Do you know the big explodey things that have been happening? You know the massive explosion noises?
No.
Those are explosives. You've walked past it, you daft punk.
Can't say I noticed.
This is so buffy, can't crouch.
That's what it is, Tomahawk.
He just makes
This is so hench.
he just makes diamonds in his arse crack if he tries to crouch. Right,
Look at the chunky his legs are.
listen to the noise. You hear that? That's an explosion.
Wow.
Wow.
The big muscular man. Loud sounds.
Shit.
he just sits down. Where did that come from?
Fucking dogs. Fucking dogs. Fucking dogs.
fuck.
Fucking dogs.
You're doing what?
Your dogs are allergic to ladders.
Oh shit. Just attack me from behind. That'll do. Okay, that worked. Just shot
I
him or
bravely
something.
ran away,
He did.
and that's why
That
it's
was
annoying.
smart,
Right, okay. He's a big muscular man. The loud sounds are just sounds to him. His ear muscles are the only ones he hasn't trained. What are you shooting?
The guy with the crossbow. Reload.
If he wasn't in a bad mood, would he just be an okay bow or just because he's cross?
Right. This way.
¿Dónde estás?
No, that's bollocks. This way. Right, I'm here. Sorry, got lost. Yes, this way. Nope. This way.
Just wait for him to see it.
What? What are you doing?
Cool guys don't look at explosions. Is he holding a wrench?
Yep, sure is.
You want to back them up?
See? Yep, cheers. Right, here's somebody else, I think. Never mind.
Well, they couldn't hold a crowbar for legal reasons. I know. Valve will soon. I was going to say, you're not
sure
Morgan
that
Freeman.
happens.
It's Gordon Freeman, isn't it?
Yeah, Gordon, yeah. Okay.
Your man hasn't disappeared yet.
And it. Right. Probably shouldn't use a shotgun that far away. That's not a good idea.
Not at that range. No, I wouldn't think so.
No. I move on.
It's a crowbar.
Shit. Where's that dog mutating for? Please die. You're taking on the ammo.
Where are you?
Fighting this stupid dog. Sorry, I got it. But it took all my ammo in the process. Like, everything.
You've 30 bullets.
Oh, I don't. Yeah, I have 30 for machine gun, I think. Which I don't have. Wait, what? Yes, I do. Why can't I?
Come on!
I don't understand.
Why are you shooting? Come on, I'm waiting on you.
I didn't mean to. Oh, there we go, there we go. Right, I couldn't combine the bullets, but I could reload. Okay, we're alright. Never mind. Right, so I couldn't open that gate. Any other ammo about? No.
Alright, up here, there's something. Here, come on over to me.
Do you make them up?
Yeah, I'll come back right home. Right, so... Right, take
Thank
it.
you. Perfect. So the original RE4 was like this, where you had a standstill game as well, wasn't it? It was only the
Yeah, they
remake
what?
that was changed.
Oh, yeah. You couldn't walk and shoot.
Yeah. That's right.
Oh, look at this bridge filled with explosives. I'm sure nothing bad will happen here.
Absolutely not.
This is gonna be fine.
What the heck was that? A grenade?
Grenade.
Incendiary grenade? Okay. And I got ammo for a
Grenade.
shotgun.
Do
so-
you remember the
so
first
reload
Dread
that.
film? Judge Dredd? With Sylvester Stallone?
Yeah.
His gun used to talk every time he changed ammo.
I actually didn't mind that film.
I didn't mind it. Some bits were very good, some bits were not so much. Like, the start of it was great, and then it just kind of got a bit shit.
He's just
Oh, there's guys coming now.
okay. Oh. Nice. Ow. I love that you shoot their legs in the fall. That's fantastic.
I need some ammo.
There's some scattered legs in there.
Yeah, that's it.
I'll take this. Don't mind.
There we go. Sucking the gun.
Careful now. There's trouble water under that bridge.
Hey!
See what you did there.
Bitch. Look at him lopping all the ammo. Some
I'm taking it off, fucking.
No manners.
Would it
no
adapt to a game? Well,
ladies first. Never
that's a
mind
good
all
question, Tom. Fantastic question, if you will. We reference or we teaser.
that. But would it adapt
Tomahawk,
the game well?
What's the procedure? Like, do you talk about episodes ahead of time, or is it like secret until it launches? Shiva is normally the ammo carrier, or if you're playing solo, is that how it works?
I did see that where someone was playing and just gave her all the stuff to carry.
Right, I suppose so. I suppose so. That kind of makes sense.
Right, there's a path down here. Which way do we go? We'll check
There's a
over here
tunnel
first.
underneath.
Yeah.
Let's just keep looking. See.
There's ammo there if you need it. See, look
sure,
at me
I'll
being
never say no.
conscientious.
There's a.
I know you'll never say no, you fucking slut.
Their AI is garbage in single player. Oh, I can imagine.
Hey, Chris's AI
Andy,
isn't
it's-
great here now, multiplayer.
Shut your face. Candy is scheduled to release tomorrow. Right, okay. So the reference that Tomac was making there is we recorded. I did a guest appearance last night on High School. So we did an episode themed around video game to TV adaptations. But then at the end of the episode, we were kind of slightly discussing the other way about the TV to game adaptations. We only briefly touched on it though. Like as this is, if you watch it, you'll find out. But as this is, kind of deserves its own episode. No way.
Shivan at the 4-armed bird from Mortal Kombat. I think so.
I was thinking the name sounded familiar, Big Boss.
Dogs!
Good teamwork.
Yeah. The shotgun shells there.
Oh, I'll take that. Thank you. But the goal we both get, so either of us can pick that up. Do the enemies have like an iframe mechanic, as in like when they're getting up? Are they like invincible during their animation? Is that a thing?
There's a few of them in RE2, like getting up and down ladders. In the remake, you have certain iframes, so you can let them lunge at you, and they can't touch you
Right.
until you actually step off the ladder. But it wastes
See,
their
that's
lunge.
interesting because like maybe that's a
Like Hulk
factor
Hogan?
there, and we can save ammo. You know what I mean?
I think the way they
Like
save
Hulk
ammo in
Hogan.
this
Exactly
is
like Hulk Hogan.
they kind of lean on their like somersaults and kicks and anything
right. We
that
should be
doesn't-
using that more.
yeah, like shoot them in the knee and then take them down
close.
that way.
And we should be doing what Asher says too. Tag teaming.
Just combos.
Just step closer to the orbis though. Cutscene. That's my guess. No?
Yeah.
Okay.
Back
And
outside.
so is this game just autosave?
Looks like it, yeah. There's no ribbons or anything.
My
Probably makes it easier for multiplayer. These guys are going to get up. Do it.
Yeah, not bad.
He's coming. Watch out!
Well, that was fun.
Yeah. That's a new twist. The shotgun shells. No, it's cool. That was obvious. Two shotgun shells to kill them things, you joking?
Yeah.
Handgun ammo, that's it there to get up. Yes, you break that lock with your knife.
No, you have to shoot it. I was hoping they didn't have to waste ammo on it.
Ah, fair enough, so.
Look at you giving me
go
grief
with that
trying to
one.
not waste ammo, you fucker.
What's this?
Some crack.
Oh, sapphire. There we go. No cash monies.
Here comes the money. Money talks. There was no need for you to kick that door. No
Yes,
need.
there was.
Just push it open. Just push
Dramatic
it
effect.
open. No,
Yeah, there was.
stop being aware. I mean, I broken locks.
Broken many locks with your foot. I did. The time that Leyoric moved house, and then he didn't tell me where he moved to. I came round and kicked his door in, and I was like, surprise!
You know, that's not even a joke. Motherfucker landed at my front door, and I didn't even know his address. He didn't even know my address. He previously didn't know my address because I wouldn't tell him.
Why would you not
Footlocker,
tell me? Because I
hey!
kept Footlocker. I kept sending Leyoric stuff in the post to his previous address, like gifts or whatever random shit, and he was like, "I'm not
They're
telling you where I
just
live,
like
so you can't send
naked
me
framed pictures of himself.
this." Yeah, as it says, gifts. Yeah. And then I played the ultimate card and I messaged his wife, who loves me. I was like, what's your address? And she was like, oh, it's this.
Traitor. Absolute traitor behavior. We can go to the
I was
beach.
like, your husband won't tell me. She was like, oh, it's this.
Right, there's a wee house up here. I think we probably have to go in here first.
Subscriptions to illicit magazines. The type that you would find in the woods as a child. No? Those.
Do you need ammo?
Always.
There's handgun. Both side.
Okay, cheers. Right.
But the problem is, I wouldn't have minded if it was illicit magazines. It was just magazines talking about Halo. It's like Halo Monthly and Linkin Park Weekly.
You leave Linkin Park alone. Right. Absolutely smashing it at the minute, actually. Linkin Park. Since our comeback. Like,
Who's smashing
insanely
it? Linkin Park?
Linkin Park, yeah.
I like your woman. I think she's good.
Oh, she's fantastic.
Emptiness Machine's phenomenal. Like the amount of times I listen to that song.
It's, you know, like obviously like it's well known like
Bangers. I know.
in that genre that
Good
like
line,
Nullman
good
in the end and stuff are like over 1 billion streams.
Yeah.
Emptiness Machine is over half a billion, like 500 million. That's how big it is. It's nuts. What a comeback.
I
song.
love the reveal as well they did of her whenever I knew they were just playing the song and she just came walking out of the crowd.
I watched it live that night because it was like 1 AM cross and I was texting Chris Akira at the time. I was like, holy shit, I have goosebumps. And how did I? Where are you going? He's just trying to turn that water, get away from me. It's not one. No, that is wasted bullets. That's right.
Got an emerald. Feel like Sonic the Hedgehog. Fucking running around here getting emeralds.
Have you listened to the full album, Latency? Because it is fantastic. You shoot more locks.
Oh, there's a guy up here. His keys on him.
Ah, good spot. That's just loot, I think. Pick it up there.
Nope, port key. Let's
Oh,
get to
nice.
the. Oh shit! Wait,
shit.
Start. Crap! We've started something. We just run to the port.
Oh, aye, aye. Just run past it. Oh, okay. Are you
Roundhouse.
okay?
Right, I'm running. I'm running. You following me?
Yep. I'm at the port. Let's get on the roof. We'll go inside that. Right, what's, do we have to drive this boat or something?
Drive the car.
I think we just have to run though.
I don't know. I don't know where we're going.
Yeah, there's a marker on the map. The yellow marker. Could have said it. Oh shit, what the fuck was that? Crossbow?
You two okay?
Oh, who's this? Who's this? Who's this? Who's this? What's happening?
He's got an RPG.
Right, off the walk, Thorn. Have a good one. Much no well. Thank you very much for the raid, buddy.
Watch out!
Enjoy.
Thanks, Kirk.
I didn't think HQ actually cared.
That RPG is it not released?
Where are you? Where are you?
Where are you? It seems.
'Cause I'm about to die.
Come towards me if you can. No, come back. Right, come this way. Come this way. 'Cause there's a bit of cover around this side. Oh shit. Just give you a grenade bomb, so it's like
Oh, I'm getting a raid. Riku, what's happening? Thank you very much for the raid, buddy. What's the story? How did the rest of your stream go? The Riku Horde is here to hype you up. Amazing. Sorry, folks. We can't really pause at the moment. We're in the middle of a co-op game of Resident Evil. Resident Evil.
Yeah, you're right. You can't really pause this. It's a bit of a nightmare.
What is the crack? How did the rest of Kingdom Hearts go? Welcome on. Anybody in my chat isn't following Riku, he is an IRL buddy, and he's recently started his streaming journey. If you could drop him a wee follow, that'd be much appreciated. He's playing a lot of Kingdom Hearts at the moment, and smashing it. Jazzy, thank you very much for the tier 1. Appreciate it. Oh, going on birdie bastards.
Shit.
It was the crack. How did the stream go? Did you bring the light to all your hearts? I'm dying. I'm dying. Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Right, keep going. Sorry, chat. This game does not lend well to catching up.
It was great fun. It really well completed the timeless river and the pirates level. Ooh, very nice.
Oh, sniper rifle.
Excellent. Well done.
Right, hold on. I might have a machine gun I can give you.
You have room for it?
I can discard it, but I don't know about delete it.
It might.
Really? I don't really want to do that. I could try. Oh, cheers. Here, let me try. No, actually, I don't want to do it. Unless chat knows.
What's wrong? I am going to flip over and go to my Hall of Fame just to show Riku that he's made it.
Go for it.
You made it. Riku, there you are up there in purple. Welcome and thank you very much for the raid again. I appreciate it. Anybody Riku's chat that's just come on? My name's TheHooke. I'm an IRL buddy of Riku. I'm playing a variety of different games at the moment, but we're making our way through the Resident Evil games, and that's why me and Hooke are doing this collab stream, because both of us have made it up to RE4, and now we're hitting Resident Evil 5.
Finally.
Finally! Right, okay, where are we going? Outside? Oh, there's a wee marker beside us.
That's where you come in, isn't it? Oh,
there's a wee marker over here.
Shit. Okay.
Should we look for more ammo and all first?
It wouldn't hurt. Because there's nobody attacking us at the moment.
Not at the
nice.
moment, no.
Can I get on this button?
Usually stream at the same no, we never stream at the same time. Now me and Hooke I might be doing more Sundays anyway, because me and Hooke are looking to play through this and then RE6. So we're gonna see how that goes. That's why I didn't stream last night as well, because I knew this one was coming up and I didn't want my face to be on Twitch too much.
Plus you'd probably just burn yourself out. We've got doing 2 nights in a row as well.
Probably could do.
Right, I don't think there's anything about you, you know?
I think that's us.
Nice thunderstorm for clicking on.
Wow! Can't believe you didn't stream last night. Had a reminder set and all that and say, I'm sorry, buddy.
Oh.
I'll try and do it next week. I'll do my Saturday one next week.
Right. I need pistol ammo, so if I find some of that, great. But if not, I'll be alright for now.
Yeah, I'll give you some.
Oh, amazing. Thank you. I can hear things. It's so creepy.
No, it's too late. Cry myself to sleep. I'm sure you did.
Lindsay, how's the week went, by the way? Like, I know, because obviously interviews and stuff like that. Stop.
Double team.
That's what we should have done. Can't stop.
Yeah, I think so. Just to do that bit of melee damage.
That was much quicker.
There's so many places that. I don't like this. What's the 2 chainsaws? Here, I'm going to bounce. Ricky, no problem. Thank you very much for the raid, and you enjoy the rest of your night. Well,
good night, dude.
Have one tomorrow and one on Wednesday. Is this your streams, latency?
No, interviews, I think he means.
Interviews, right, okay. I love just this smashing fist first through a window.
Oh, I just use your head.
Oh man, you've got it. You've got it.
Right. Just keep going.
I think so. Good night to both of you legends. Have a great stream. Thank you very much.
Thanks, dude. Look after yourself. Right, how do we...
Need to help out in the case. In the casa. Sorry. Casa means house in Spanish.
This way.
Casablanca means White House.
Oh shit. The bird's got him.
I'm under attack by 5 POWs. I'm losing
I'm going down.
Kurt, what's going on? Come in, Kurt!
There's ammo
Shotgun
for
bullet.
your shotted gun.
Oh, nice. Where?
Oh, did you pick up that rifle?
Yes, sniper. Ah,
There's rifle ammo too.
All nearby units proceed
amazing.
to the crash site.
thank you. Oh, let me reload here.
We'll go dark for a sec. Have a returnal boss attempt. Good luck, Tomahawk. You got it.
Good luck. Good luck, Tomahawk. Right, I think I have to run around the outside. Or go up there.
I can just see them playing about and shotguns just bopping them.
Oh, this isn't good. Right, I can funnel them a wee bit here. I can constantly forgetting to reload. Something. Shotgun's great when you remember to reload it.
Rawr!
Or incendiary grenade?
It's another grenade, yeah. I am low on ammo, man.
I feel like I'm meant to get to the top or something. I feel like these things are going to keep coming.
Only in a literal sense.
Right. Got ammo. No, not.
I'm coming. I'm a coming.
I should have upcovered him, I forgot. Yeah, he's dead. Okay.
I'm a
Shotgun.
coming.
Tomahawk was chatting about Returnal. I think that's a game I might stream sometime, you know.
It's difficult, but it's good. It's on PlayStation Plus as well.
Yeah.
Which is
Sure
good.
is.
There's more shotgun ammo.
Oh, gentlemen, thank you.
And then Saros is the sequel, or well, it's not the sequel. It's
Yeah.
like an unofficial,
Spiritual.
yeah, successor to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I
think
knew
will at some
I knew
stage.
someone was going to be there.
Right in here. Okay, this way. There's a herb
Do you
in there.
have 43 handgun bolts?
I might do. Do you need some?
Ah, we about that.
That's all right. Give.
Oh, thank you.
There, it gave you 20.
Come on! Come on!
Chris, give out your gun.
Oh, fuck! I never even seen him.
Oh, nice.
He's still alive. Fuck, I had to stab him too and everything.
But yeah.
Where are you? Where are you? You up the stairs?
Fighting with the camera angles here.
There, I gave you more ammo. Oh, shot it gun.
Love how he just stamps on his hand. Of all the things you could do there in that situation, stamp on his head, not his hand.
No, his hand was where the danger was. It's where the infection looked. Get a hand at them.
Because I need it. Right, there's a door. No, it's a pipe. It's not a door. Anything out there? No.
A couple of grenades. Oh,
Right, okay, you take it.
grenade. There's
Here,
handgun
take that
ammo there.
handgun ammo.
You sure?
Another one here. So yeah, there's another one there. You take that one there.
Don't always believe in your soul. You're indestructible.
Right, we can jump across probably.
The assisted jump.
Whoa. Badass.
How do you get across them?
I don't. That's the thing.
Oh, we split up. Ah, crap. Okay.
Where am I going to go? This way? Right.
I think I'm just stuck in a bit of a combat situation here for a bit.
I think I'm across the room. I have to try and assist you. Oh, nice. I don't have it.
I feel like I'm going a bit quiet here, but I'm just concentrating on the game a little bit too much.
It's freaking nuts. There's a guy right beside you there.
Oh, someone shooting me.
Is this rifle one shot? It is, man. Oh, it has... Can't think of the term. You shoot 2 people at one time. Can't think of the term. What I'm trying to think of here.
Right. I think that should... Oh, no. Blanche, what's happening?
Blanche.
It won't be until... I don't think it will be until I actually kill them all that music stops.
Right, okay. Is that you not playing?
Look at these 2 tall glasses of water on a hot day. Oh, Blanche, you flirt. Yeah, you flirt. What's happening?
Collateral.
Collateral.
That's what I'm trying to think of.
Is this the Tom Cruise film?
Use your ground. It's an intense game. It is.
I am downstairs now. Oh, they have to open this door so you can... you want to come down the stairs?
Right, okay. I'm going to read it first. Good idea.
There's a lot of explosive barrels, which makes me really fucking worried.
Which makes me think there's going to be another big fucking mutant thing.
Yep. Same.
Right, I'm going to reload all my guns.
How the hell are you both? We're doing really well, Blanche.
Ah, we are.
We
This
are-
game doesn't
It's
lend
good.
very well to chatting. Is the only
I'm
thing.
enjoying it though. I think it's good.
I am. I am. I will, at the start, it did overwhelm me a wee bit. I'll be honest. But I'm enjoying it. I have to say.
We're now whelmed. We were overwhelmed before, and now we're whelmed.
Exactly. That's just right. Oh, what time is it? You right down there?
Right, I'm being chased. Shoot him in the dick. I'm gonna go around the other side. Go flank him. Flank him. Professional yappers forced to lock and play.
Yes.
This is true. Oh,
That's
Jesus.
exactly it.
It's the 2 lovers. Mrs. Hooke, don't you be jealous. Quick adjustment. Man's getting tired. Normally, plenty of yapping breaks. Is that
That's
Chris
what it is.
Redfield? It is.
That's what I struggled with at the start of the
He's
stream.
a
tonight. I
one-man
was saying,
arm.
Trying, like, not having me 40 minutes of talking. I was like, what? We're in the game already? After
We're
like
in the
3
game.
minutes? It
Ready to
felt
go.
weird.
Well. That's about that. No, because we logged into the game, realized we didn't know how to set up multiplayer.
That's also true.
We were
too
not in the game
busy
for 3
worrying about
minutes.
OBS and stuff that we didn't even think to test the game. Which, that's Leyoric's fault, but that's fine.
Fuck if I... Mrs. Hook, how much could I pay you to go up and slap him? 40 and the rest?
40 and the rest.
Girlfriend's here, Hook.
No need to trim the stats.
Trim the stats.
I do love a good chin wag though. That's the thing.
True.
I do.
Where
Wait,
are
is
you?
that you up ahead or?
Where are you? I have some ammo.
Oh,
here.
thank you. I'm here.
Give that and give that.
Right, I think. Let me check everything's reloaded. Oh, beautiful. Oh, look at that. What a guy. Gal. Sorry.
You keep that right. You keep that right. I am a pretty lady.
Checkpoint. Sweet. I like that it auto says, mind you.
Yeah, that's good because we're going to die a lot.
Ah, shit.
Yeah.
There's the chainsaw. You knew that was coming.
Chainsaw man. I feel like he just could have reached his arm through and open it.
Scarecrow?
Right, we have explosives that we can use. Or you can just shoot them. Oh, they're coming on from behind us as well.
Ah, cool, sir.
Come on!
Oh shit, right behind you. Shooting him in the head, stuns him. There you go. There was a prompt there, so good. I just got out of the dogs there. Oh shit, no ammo.
Oh, pop.
I'm dead. I went to shoot him point blank and I had no ammo. I do that all the time. I'm dead.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't get you.
You're alright. I do it all the time. I don't realise that the gun doesn't auto reload.
Nuclear, what's happening? This is my
It's
first
very
Resident Evil. Absolutely hate it. And we're having a blast with it. Fucking loving it.
I remember me and McKen's tried this game back when it came out, and you know that first area where like it was just on a timer
Yeah.
at the start of stream tonight? We didn't get past there. We gave up.
You gave up. He's like,
It annoyed us that much.
Not for me.
We gave
Not
up.
for me.
Yeah, we were just all this shit, and we never went back to it. Right, there's treasures and stuff we can sell.
Yeah, we just upgrade our shit and
Yeah.
get more ammo. Second chain set. I know.
Cut in half. Cut down my prime.
Ledger's been signed. The party has grown.
I think tonight's the night that you're gonna beat the boss.
Should I go for a weapon? I need a
You
weapon.
could. I upgrade the capacity
Like what
of my
weapons
shotgun.
do you, what weapons do you have? You have the MP5 shotgun and the rifle and a handgun.
And a rifle and a pistol. I have 4.
Where
at
I've
the minute,
gone for an Uzi and my handgun just.
Nah, it's not bad.
But I might go shotgun. Get rid of the Uzi.
But daddy is a state of mind.
Shotgun's
you know
nice.
what I'm
Daddy.
saying? I'm your daddy.
I'm just gonna upgrade my shotgun again. Honestly, it's worth it. Upgrade.
Yup.
Right, I am basically spent here, I think. I don't really have much in the way of health items. Actually, I don't have any. So I probably should have bought some, but that's on me.
I have 2. I was
Find
going to
them
give
as
you
you
one.
play anyway.
I was going to give you one, but you don't have room for any.
Yeah, I don't exactly. But sure, you find them as you play anyway, so that's grand.
I'm going to maybe upgrade my shotgun a little bit and then see if I can buy some ammo for it.
Go for it. Did you complete this nuclear even though you hated it? I started with Resi. Resi
Can
1
buy it.
remake
Can
and
buy
then I
it.
did Zeroed. Loved it. Loved it.
I'm ready. Delbo!
Delbo.
What's happening?
What is happening? We did that in
Your beloved?
we could do that again if we tried. Your beloved is Resident Evil 5. Now, I know that your beloved Doom game is Doom 3. But Resident Evil 5? Resident Evil 0 is my favourite, which is a bit of an obscure pick. I think most people would pick Resi 2. Or Resi 4.
Right, we
Right,
ready for
we're
this
up.
guy? Or will
I
we?
suppose so.
Yeah, we don't have any more ammo. Let's go!
We just have to trigger the cutscene, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just going to stand down here. I'll stand far away.
Far away. Can't skip the
Double,
cutscene.
I hope you're well. You can't skip by. Hope the family's well.
Can you? Oh, you can skip, I can't.
Ah, because I'm host.
Right, I'll get the guys behind you if you want to catch him in that explosion.
Right then.
Hadouken!
Can you kill the shotgun person? Is that a thing?
What's this?
Do the shotgun guys die?
I don't know.
I got too close. Jesus, what was that explosion? Didn't kill me.
That was me.
I don't have any health to heal. I can't. I open this button.
Chasing me. Chasing me. How you getting on? Love this game. Understand the complaints, but it carried so many drunken nights. Yes.
Class. Probably should have reversed my shotgun on him, but sure. Oh, there you go. So he's following you.
Yep.
Run. Yeah, for anyone in the chat that doesn't know Robo, doesn't get the streaming as much these days, which is a real shame. I love that game. One of the first people I met back in the day when I started streaming. When I used to do me morning stream, remember them? You know?
Oh, I do. Your Sunday mornings for class.
They were a good time. I made a lot of Aussie friends back then. Fortunate. But I'm just going to run away from this guy. Just change real guys quick. That's not fair. It's coming down to the
There we shout out for Galbo. If he ever returns to the streaming, definitely give him a follow. Fucking FPS machine. Pass! Double team. Yep. Flash kick.
I wonder, do we need to kill him with the set piece? Nope, we do not. There we go, that answers that. The timing couldn't have been better. Back again, boys.
Nice one. There we go, guard's key.
I understand the complaints, but this game carries
there's machine gun ammo.
I get that, dude.
If you want to grab it.
I don't see it. Did you pick it up? Oh no, shit, sorry, it's right beside me. Alright.
Just make sure there anybody else dropping. Handgun ammo. Sweet! You do chew through a lot of ammo in this, don't you?
Oh, fuck. I nearly picked up a copy of Doom 3 original Xbox at a charity shop not that long ago, like last week, the week before. But I checked the disc, and the disc was in terrible condition, so I gave it a pass.
Doom 3 I love Doom 3. It's a great game.
I've not played it.
It's not their fast-paced Doom sort of game. It's a horror game, and it's great.
It's a horror game.
Like the suspense and all is phenomenal.
There was a double did streams of it actually, where there was like a mod you can do. It was like a graphics mod, sort of kind of modernized it in a way. It was fantastic looking at the time, but yeah, it was only a pound. So like, passing it up, I was like, oh. But the disc wouldn't have worked.
You can't get that digitally.
Oh, you could get it digitally, but physical media all the way, man.
Yeah, I suppose. I like that there's a YouTuber that pops up every now and again on mine as well, and he's very much, whenever a game comes out, he tests to see if it actually is physical media, in the sense that. You're already way ahead of me. There you are.
Good collectible, but the disc, exactly, man. Yeah, the disc is cooked. Yeah.
Yeah, so he'll test the game to see if you can truly play it offline, or does it need to download itself. So like Call of Duty games are useless, where it's just a key in the disc and that's it.
I hate that. Like, do you remember games going gold?
I think Pragmata's one where it. Oh, we've loads. Pragmata's one where it will just play offline as well. It installs from the disc, which is good. But he goes through testing a whole pile of different games just to make sure.
You obviously know me, like I love physical media and original hardware and stuff, so that's right up my street if a game is actually on the disc. I understand the games get patches and stuff, but like, if you can play the base game as it ships on the disc without updates, then I think that's great.
There's a herb if you want it, man.
My inventory's full. Let me.
I'll
give you a bolt, which means I can pick it up. There we go. Actually, I can combine now, I think. Ah, sweet. Get the space back. Right, shotgun's full.
It's right up your alley too. If Steam ever went down, I think I would fall into depression because of basic. Yeah, I have so much on Steam as well.
It's right up your alley.
Did you win yet? Richard? We are winning.
We're actually getting the hang of this now.
We're winning.
We weren't at the start. We were terrible, but we're getting there. I remember those days when a game locked, bugged or broken, well, bad luck. Your game sucks. I know. Yeah. So fucking true. It wasn't really to like 360 PS3 era where we started getting updates for games, wasn't it? Games still went gold back then, of course, but like, you would have got title updates.
Go away.
For games.
You remember with our Nintendo games? Was it the Wii? There was a bug in one of the Wii games, and you had to actually send away your save. for them to fix it.
That's right. That's right.
Update
We
those
was a
cartridges?
fantastic
No,
concept.
definitely not. I had to listen to an exam audio and type of feedback, but I'm back. Ooh, very good. Did they win? Did they do well? You tell us. We won't tell anybody.
Oh, it's ship of that. Man burning on a pipe. Nope. Raven boss.
Well, I'm sure it was for a good cause. For a good cause. They passed. Woohoo! They won.
No updating those cartridges? Nah, not at all. I've been loving. I don't know if you've seen it though, but I got a I got a Dell 3 phone with CRT monitor, and I have been loving connecting.
That's not a zombie.
It
says the retro's cracking up. Oh my god, right, okay. Ignitus, what's happening? There's a bit of back to several versions. Yeah, different versions of cartridges.
I see, that makes sense. See, but I suppose that's the incentive of bits, isn't it? Rather than just strict physical damage cartridges and millions in the world. I don't know, that's the simplicity. Oh man, I love it. It's only a 14-inch, but because it's CC here, I have it connected to the GBSC scale and it looks amazing. I was playing, I connected up the PlayStation 1 and did it last week. I was like, no, I'll take a photo of it, see how it looks. I'll play it for like an hour.
Queen, what is happening? Oh, it's just guy.
I don't know, but I'm happy. This cutscene's bad. I'm happy as I'm Sniper, look.
FYI guys, this game is so much lighter than you hope. Is that okay?
Oh, is it? Shit. Who stream are you on, Queen? Leyorics?
Yeah, I could pop it down a wee bit in mine. It's a very loud scene as well, isn't it? Per hook, I can't even hear him in Leyoric and it mumbles. Welcome on, Queen Bee.
Queen,
Sniper
good
Elite.
to see you. Thank you for the feedback too.
The
Looking for
cutscenes
PCCRT for years, and you had to find one reasonably priced locally and in decent shape. I'm exactly the
No,
same.
I
I can't
hear
find
you.
one to buy. But my
I find
brother-in-law
the
just happened
cutscenes
to
are
get one.
very loud in this.
Thanks, Josh. I owe you one.
You guys know each other.
I trained under
Yeah, 'cause this
Josh.
part's nice and
He
quiet.
taught me everything I
Yeah.
know.
Shiva became little sister of the team. Now Shiva, you must continue your search for Irvin. According to the
Just so you know,
data we
Sheva's
found on the
me.
hard drive,
So
we believe he has moved
Sheva's
on
a
to
bald
Miami.
man with a beard.
There's more info inside.
And I'm Chris
We'll
because I
follow
love
after
Logan, of
taking
course.
care of business
Yeah,
here.
because Hook is an absolute tank in real life.
Keep your radio
Yeah.
handy just in case.
Makes
7'3" up the ways and sideways as well. He's just a square.
Just a square.
A fucking cube.
It's a giant CRT.
Jeva looks exactly like Leyoric, is what you mean. Exactly. That's it.
That's it then. How was both your weekends? I had a class weekend. You know what? I didn't really do anything for I basically sat in with Mrs. Hooke and the kiddo, and we just chilled and we watched. You know what I did? Speaking of physical media, I got the DVD player.
Leyoric,
out,
it's been a
we hooked
pleasure.
it up,
Ignitus, pleasure to
no
meet
pun
you too.
intended,
Forget
and
it.
watch films. It's great.
I know you anyway from Hook's
Let's move out.
chat. I'm the guy who keeps trying to ban the streamer, but for some reason Twitch doesn't let me. Another chapter. Look at that. S ranks. Accuracy. What 64% accuracy? What the fuck? You playing it?
You have an aimbot installed? I'm telling you.
Yeah, fuck.
I've seen you play other Resident Evil games. That doesn't check out.
Isn't that the Resident Evil
accuracy?
2 remake speedrunner you're talking to?
Aye, but have you seen your accuracy in that? You just run past them, that's why.
I know. I accurately run past him. The thing. He tolerates me. He tolerates a lot of us, I think.
That's a
You-
toll.
He has not been a fan of my jokes this stream.
No, 90% of them, no, not at all.
I have enough Blu-rays to watch one a day for at least 2 years. I really should get on that. I like
That's
it. I like
classic.
collecting Blu-rays, so I like because they still are better quality than Netflix. Because Netflix is it's 4K.
Oh.
It's not
Yeah.
4K. It's
No. It's 1080p scale to 4K is essentially what you're getting at the best of times.
Whereas if you get like
Honestly, we seen that this week. We connected up the DVD player and playing physical DVDs and stuff. Looks fantastic. Oh, it's so nice. Like, we have about 40 of them at the minute, and I just laid them out, and I was like, right, 10. And see that idea then of picking the physical film and putting it on and watching it the whole way through. So he wasn't halfway through it and be all, I want to watch something else on Netflix. He's 3.
you still love your Plex saver.
So that's why I'm doing it.
You know what's class? You don't understand this, but see when you're bald, just rubbing your head.
I had my, if you go back to, see when I started streaming 2022, so like 2020, 2021, and like the start of 22, I shaved my head. I had it buzzed.
I don't remember.
So like my earliest streams, my hair's really short. And then I kind of just kept it growing out since then. So no, I do understand. I probably will shave my head sooner rather than later, to be honest.
Ready to be bald. Daddy, you tell him.
Yeah. Just go for it.
Yeah, Blu-rays almost be yeah, 100% better. Yeah, it's if you don't really care about the visual quality, you know, whack away with Netflix. But if you're sitting down to watch Lord of the Rings or something, then put on that Blu-ray.
That's when it matters. Shit like that. Right.
Teddy went to the committee about it. Not enough. Shave head more. I'm close to bald. Nice. You're joining the crew.
Not enough, Hooke.
the aerodynamic angels. That's what we're gonna call ourselves.
You always love your Plex server. Have you been Oh, you bought lifetime Plex, didn't you, Latency? Like, I've been meaning to set up Joy-Con, because obviously Plex's features are more restricted these days. I'm close to shaving my head, but I really want to keep... Might need a wee trusty turkey. Man, I understand it, to be honest, but like... The biggest thing for men, especially men that are going bald, you worry loads about how it's going to look, but see, once you shave your head, you don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah. My dad got me and my sister Plex server. Oh, they're so handy. They're so handy, especially because then you can just stream it around the house, whatever you download.
Yeah, I still use Plex. I've been meaning to switch to Joy-Con because I believe Plex is going paid. I don't know. Beast. From Mother
but
East,
I
89.
love my hair. No, Latency, join us.
Thank you for the follow.
Join us. Let's go. Oh, my Vegeta hair.
I use Joy-Con, bit buggy sometimes, but it costs a whopping $0. Exactly double. Exactly.
I have a few
want my
spots
Vegeta
out
hair again.
What's the matter with you?
Just the widow's peak.
What's the matter? What's wrong? You want cuddles? You coming up for cuddles?
Just have a few spots that are standing. See, I don't think I've ever actually really talked about this on stream, but if you see me in person, like, see here, for example, like at the bottom of the back of my head, and then there's a spot here, like towards the side, is kind of like, it's like a stress-induced, like alopecia in a way, where it gets worse and then it gets better and it gets worse and gets better.
Are you not looking at her? Look at her.
Ah,
look at the Wayne. Look at the Wayne. Look at her.
There she is.
That's your baby.
What a dog. Favorite child. Favorite child.
What's the matter? You just want cuddles? You want cuddles, don't you? Hmm?
I get my kids to FaceTime a man like, Grandad, we need Sonic. See, that's just genius. Because then you can go and legitimately download
get down before
the films and put them on the Plex server, of course.
No one redeemed it, but I'm still going to give you a treat. I don't know that's what you're after.
I need to start ripping my DVDs for Joy-Con again. See, I don't mind that. See, if I own the physical media, I don't mind having my own like Joy-Con or Plex server set up.
Yes, Ignitus it does.
Still own the media.
That's our first time playing this.
It does Ignitus, yeah. The only time we've ever co-streamed, we did Portal 2. And that was good crack. I enjoyed that.
My lord, when will you embrace the balding god and shave it off? Join the beard club? Yes?
That comb over is embarrassing.
Oh no, he doesn't have it. I did though. For my Resident Evil 4 stream, I put on a wig and I looked like Janice Battersby with a beard.
I am not bald.
I am very bald.
I have a big forehead now. I have a 5 head. Actually, there's a redeem port on my channel because my forehead is massive.
Dozy stick? What?
But welcome on, my lord. How are you?
I own all my media on my Plex server. Definitely. Yes, you have physical copies of all
100% Latency. So much so that Latency offered me one time a copy of his Plex server, like aka all the physical media to rip, you know. Thank you, TheHooke.
Also, Latency.
Look at that hairline.
He built an extension to his house out of the DVDs of his physical media.
He did.
He has that much.
He was going to use Blu-rays, but too expensive.
I head off the bed now, but the kitchen didn't realize it was 11 p.m. That's 11 p.m. Oh my god. Thank you very much, Wesker, for coming on. You go and enjoy your sleep.
Look after yourself. Much love. Thank you very much for hanging out. I was lurking a week. Well, it must have been before you were off for a few days.
Taking up so much space. Aye, fair play, fair play.
I'm just upgrading weapons and stuff here, by the way.
I've upgraded mine now.
There's a melee vest you can get for 10k. I must try and save up that thing, but for now I'm going to buy some health items.
Might be good. But is it one of them ones where it disappears as soon as it's gone?
Oh, it might be, actually. It might be temporary, yeah.
Last time I streamed was my birthday. Should get back eventually.
It was my birthday. Right, okay. No, actually, it wasn't your last stream then. But anyway, I'll not keep you. Sorry, I'll shut the fuck up. Look after yourself. Have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, I know that. Shut the fuck up, man.
I do it all the time. You people chatting, they're like, oh, fuck up and trying to go.
TheHooke almost had you for an hour last night and just like 2 hours later, he's like, man,
TheHooke had a migraine apparently after Talking to me last night.
Oh, I can hear my Wi-Fi breaking. Oh. Disconnect chat.
I'm looking forward to the episode coming out, I have to say. Oh, I don't have the capacity for that. Right, I'll just keep
I am
that
looking
then.
forward to it as well, because you were telling me that you gave me quite a bit of grief in this episode.
No, I said you were mentioned. I didn't say it was necessarily grief. You got a wee bit, but you were
I
mentioned.
just assumed grief.
Past the station. Not too far.
Cut podcast now.
Follow me.
Hello, they refill my...
Ignitus, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it.
Ignitus, you legend.
We've also had a follower goal of 670.
670?
6'7".
Oh, shut
6'7".
up, man. Seriously.
No, I'm young and hip. I know what the cool kids are all about. There's handgun ammo over here, if you want to grab it.
I will indeed.
I'm
Thank you very much.
unfallen,
Just wanted to-
mate.
I'm unfallen.
I deserve that. Why do you hear eagles? I
My,
feel like
my
there's
knee hurts
something-
more after that 6'7".
I do it all the time. I have teenage kids, and I'll be all, 6'7", skibbity toilet, no cap riz, and they just look at me going, "Ah, we fucking hate you."
Shut the fuck up, that.
Pretty much, yeah. I read the whole thing.
I don't have a capacity for that, or space, sorry, for that ammo, so you can take it if you do.
To be young. Oh no, I know. I remember it well.
What are you talking about? Still young, right? God damn it. In my head, I'm 14 at best. Right.
I'm not saying it. Not saying it. Not saying it. Not saying it.
What? What are we going to say?
Well, you certainly have the height for it.
Go, you old fool.
Cool.
Right.
Do you know what this level's good for? Training.
Like the Incredibles, Mr. Incredible, just loving the cabooses.
Yep. That's when things went off the rails.
Oh, dogs.
What the fuck did you shoot it with?
An explosive, I think. No, I shot an explosive, I should say. Got an accident.
Puppies.
That's
38. I'm
cooked.
cooked. 38. You're still young. You're still you're still a young cub.
Ignitus, I'm 35. You're like
I am 41. I'm nearly 42.
weird, but not quite.
Skibbity Toilet is such a weird one because it's from Gary's mod, which is our generation. Is it? I didn't know where it was from.
Is it from Gary's mod? I had no idea. Right, that
I do have Gary's
turned
mod
into
though.
a- Oh, no ammo.
He just fucking punched that dog.
I did.
I'm 21. Are you 21? Jesus.
Richards is a fetus. We have established that.
Well, let these guys run. Where are they? Where the fuck are they? Oh, they're behind us. Shit. Don't let them run.
Stop that dog. Stop that dog. Shit, there's three of them. Did you need to run? What's happening in the back?
Oh shit. No ammo. Ammo. We're cooked. Where are you?
Fuck off, though. Oh, fuck my ammo. I wish this game had auto reload. It's so annoying. Oh, man. Right. Have I gone with ammo? Right, where are we going? This way.
There's a guy up here. He did. He did. He did.
Right, there's an explosive here.
Technic from halfway. Surprised I couldn't get the copyright. It's an MPG, just a civilian. Oh, all right, okay. I didn't know that.
No, I didn't either, actually. But I knew it. They learn.
To be honest, though, because we're so young and hip, we probably should have known.
Chasm, what is happening? Welcome in. Too pretty, I mean. Chasm, what is happening, my friend?
Chasm, what's the story?
Right, I need ammo.
There's shotgun ammo over here. If you want it?
I will take that, yes.
Shotgun.
I've learned that the D-pad quick changes whip, which is fantastic. I've only recently learned that.
it's good to go into your ammo and kind of, or your thing and kind of actually set everything up. Can you get the stuff at
Yeah.
the angle?
What?
The ones at the angle are a bit.
Oh, wait, you
Property.
can do that?
I don't know.
I don't think. Ah, you can. Ah, you can.
Ah, shit. Shit.
I seen that. You were meant to just push that, weren't you?
Well, as soon as I jumped down, it just started moving.
Ah, right, okay, right.
Technically, it was only my fault because it happened.
Not doing too bad, Chasm. Not doing too bad. How's yourself? How was your weekend? Right.
You could try that rum from the other day. What rum from the other day? Was it the Old Navy?
I'm drinking rum as we speak.
Are you? I didn't know we were
Huh?
having a drink tonight. Although
yeah.
I sat and had a bottle of wine and watched Devil May Cry last night, and it was a good time.
You did. I will try, if I see it ignite us when I'm out and about, I'll pick it up. I do love a good rum.
Was it
New York
Old Navy,
bought me
eh?
Dead Man's Finger last year, the year before. I think it was the year before. Which was fantastic, so I often pick that up now if I see it about as well. GPS unavailable. Right. That's
Right, lads, need to head on here, up early, last minute prep. Man, good luck tomorrow. You got this. Right,
Good
so I
luck,
think
right.
one of
You
us
definitely got it.
One of us is the whole
Blanche.
torch and the other one does the shooting. Gotta go to
Good night.
bed? Not
Yeah,
a
no
problem,
worries.
Blanche. Chat to you later, brother.
All the best, dude. Right.
So
what do you
I
like
can't
for ammo?
I can't shoot when I hold this thing, man.
Yeah, but what do you like for ammo?
I have some handgun ammo and a couple of shotgun rounds.
Right, okay, I'll shoot.
I got
I don't
a
have much
nice
ammo.
vanilla vodka. Ooh.
Oh,
I'm
nice.
not a huge vodka man, but if it was vanilla flavored, I might give it a go.
Catch you real soon. Enjoy the stream. Flange, thank you very much. Very much. And it's good to have you back. I know you're traveling. Good
I
night,
know.
dude.
Like, there's a red flare up there.
Ah, sure, yeah, I'll take it. Okay. This is cool. The fact that there's like a reason for co-op dynamic.
Not really, I don't have a gun. I don't know how this
you
works.
do, you just can't use it.
I don't know how this works in single player. Like, is the AI just going to be shouting and just...
Oh, could you
walk
imagine
around
that?
you?
I don't think that guy's dead.
There's a guy on up there.
Waiting to see. No. Oh, is he dead?
Decent guys. Not done a great deal the past couple of days. Working on. I'm going to shoot this fucker. Oh no, I'm not.
Oh, I picked up the knob. Oops. Alright, your turn.
My
These
turn?
guys not
Okay.
done the last couple of days' work. Here.
Can you shine?
good,
Can you shine it
that's-
up towards this guy?
Yep.
What's that up
I
there?
didn't realise you'd started moving. How about you hit your shots, sir?
No, don't point up.
There's something above us. No?
I know.
Look
That's
up.
what I was. That's what I was shooting at.
Alright, okay.
Point the light up so I can see.
It's
Alright,
that's
I got
the
it.
best
Alright,
can
I
do.
got it.
Yeah, I couldn't.
The pain in solo mode. Right. Okay. Yeah, he just doesn't have the scratch.
I can imagine. Oops, somebody the other way too.
What?
I suppose I can just put this light down.
Yeah, you could just put it down.
Yeah. I don't have much in the way of ammo, so that doesn't.
Thanking you.
Think we're good? No. That guy's still alive. Is he dead? Don't know, can't see. Nope, still going. Shit. No ammo.
Did you know that when you're holding the lantern, you could aim it?
Nope.
Right. Okay.
Oh, got him.
Let us stop
Sniper
up
to the
here.
face. What am I doing? Gold. I really need ammo. Like, badly.
You need what?
How is my inventory full and I've no popping ammo? That makes sense? Oh, got ammo. I have 10 bolts. And
There,
something.
take a grenade.
That's it.
I caught a grenade for you. Remember accurately running away? That's how good I am. That's how good I am. Although, I still have to get them boss fights down when it comes to speedrunning.
I
Just
can see shit. Where'd you go?
working on extra
Oh,
stream
you're
stuff. Finally got head round code for StreamerBot. Nice one. Big ones. I had to move
Accurately running away. That's it.
because of that announcement that was made of Stream Elements. Or not the announcement, the rumors of Stream Elements. I moved a lot of my
kinda
stuff.
confirmed it.
Yeah. I moved a lot of my stuff off Stream Elements and onto StreamerBot. It took a while, but I got it working.
Go well. So, I think that was suggesting to run.
Like a fox.
Oh. No, stop picking up the lantern. Fuck's sake, I'm trying to stop. Seriously.
Whoa! I didn't even know
That
you
was
threw
me.
that.
Yeah. I remember from RE4 that it makes a difference. Fucking. Couldn't pick up the ammo because of my inventory's full of absolutely nothing.
Just weapons. Weapon. I need a weapon. You want ammo for it?
Do you need a weapon? I need ammo for my weapons, that's what it is. I'm in the penis.
Oh.
Oh, save the animation there. Shit, man, sure did.
Do you see if you can pick up any of the ammo?
Hold on, I need a heal.
Couldn't have done that
will do.
beside me so I could get some too now.
Oh, I forgot. Sorry. I'm overwhelmed here. There's too much going on.
I have low health. Oh, there's stuff over here.
Right, I'll stay with you because I can't see if you're going to what the f...
Snake.
Snake.
Right, you're
Right, there's
back,
health
you're
there
back,
if you want to pick it up.
Yeah, but there's also snakes somewhere.
Ah, fuck the snake. Oh, so you get the health and the ammo. Is that the way it is?
I also healed you a bit.
Right.
Did you kill that snake? No, I can hear it.
No. Fuck it. Just ignore it.
You get health from it. But there's stuff here. There's handgun ammo.
Yes. Should take that.
I can also hear somebody breathing.
I'll take that ammo. Yeah, there was somebody up this way here. Yeah, the way you're going.
Oh, I can see him. Oh shit, just realised the time. Take it easy, guys. Have a good rest of the stream. No bother.
Tomahawk.
Streamer on, streamer bot, streamer lads. I have to give. You managed to migrate it. It was difficult. It was difficult. It wasn't just copy and paste, unfortunately.
No,
because a lot of them are
course they're not.
HTMLs, CSS, and JavaScript, and they don't. And because they use
Where'd you go?
Stream Elements API, it's a bit more. It was a bit more difficult to get it to register alerts and stuff. But eventually got it working.
Right. Yeah, fair play to you because it's not easy.
Come on!
Hopefully, Stream Elements doesn't go away.
Yeah, it's a really good system, but they're going to have to do something
Yeah.
to get people to actually pay.
I can't believe they didn't go paid. Even like $1 a month. Like,
I know.
I think you had to go through there and then I stopped this in the fall. Yeah. Okay.
You all right?
Nope.
I don't know what
love
else
that
to
the
do.
uppercut animation hurts other people. It's great. Don't stomp on his head.
I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing here. Are you still fighting?
Yeah, I killed him. Sorry. Oh, good. I believe, anyway. But I'm all good.
Lateral
The music
punch.
stuff. Usually
John
good.
Punchman was a cop. There's a big drill here.
See, I don't know if I can go around the other side and meet you, but there's no map, so I don't know. Collateral punch. See, the thing is, Streamlabs is paid, I think, Gasm,
Yeah,
as well.
it
So,
is,
like, if
yeah.
you were migrating from elements to lab, there's money involved. Like, but to be fair to Streamlabs, apparently, like, that side of their business now, when it comes to like overlays and stuff, is massively good. And the fact that it's paid means it's not really going to go anywhere. I think that's where Stream Elements went wrong. It's always been free for the great service that it provided.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing to get you out of there.
Yeah, me either. Is there anything you can push to block the gate or something?
Are you still fighting?
No, I'm just standing here like a spare. Can I grab that lantern? Can. Through the fence, right? I'll take this and explore here. I don't think you need it. Oh wait.
Did you get the lantern?
Yeah.
How?
It's not working though.
How did you get it if it was on my side?
It was close enough to the gate that I could pick it up through the gate.
Come on!
But it doesn't work anymore.
Oh, there was a lever I didn't flip.
Come on!
Ah, okay. Good man.
Come on!
Right, I'm assuming we don't need that lantern anymore, so
I don't think so.
oh shit.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
People. I don't know what I'm meant to do.
Right. Do we no, you don't need to do that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Stop.
Oh shit. I'm fucking. I'm nearly dead. I'm nearly dead. Run, Shiva, run.
Ow.
Mr. Loverman. Shiva.
Oh shit. Somebody came behind.
Yeah, they're jumping down behind us. I don't think we're supposed to be in here.
No, I don't think so. Oh shit, there's a guy behind me. Right, I get out of here.
Right, we need to run. We need to start climbing.
Yeah.
You behind me?
Yep, keep going.
¿Dónde estás?
Where are you?
I'm just following you now. Oh, this seems about right.
We're going up. I think that's probably a good thing.
We're going up, up, up.
Right, there's a pile of folks coming behind us too. Oh no, only one. The rest of the aggro, I think. He's not dead. No, never mind. There's another one.
Where are you?
Behind you.
I'm in the elevator.
What? Okay.
Go, quick, get on.
As usual. Press the button.
Yes!
Oh, okay.
Women and
Wonder if
children
them
first.
Charging nothing was intentional long term, or while getting set up to have people using it, then charging but decided against the idea. Even £1 a month for those to use it would be substantial for them. It would,
Oh,
because they have
definitely, yeah.
hundreds of thousands of users.
And I had
Like, it would've
loads
been
of overlays and
huge.
stuff done up.
Yeah, it's amazing. I've used it from the start.
There's rifle ammo there, man. I am taking this here.
I go for it. What time do you want to go to, Mr. Leyoric?
Let's see if we can end a chapter now. It seems like an end of a chapter, doesn't it?
It does, doesn't it? This might work out quite well.
Yeah, if it does
I'm
time
going
me.
to do a video on simple overlays though in StreamerBot for zero cache tech, where it'll
Yeah.
only handle the HTML. And
I think maybe a good one as well on how to set up stream together.
You think
Look at
this
it.
is
Aye.
a joke?
Aye.
You're just like all
Excellent.
the other pieces of scum terrorists.
Oh, I'm not like them. I'm a businessman with standards.
Oh, that's
Drop
good.
the
Is it?
weapon.
I like this guy. He's a businessman with standards.
How about you drop yours?
Lorenzo Yassiker from Witcher.
Yeah. He's a bit of, this guy's a gas.
Only gonna
Zero cache tech. Some sort of.
Batman.
It's me and Hooke's YouTube channel.
It is indeed. Some sort of offshot brand. Yes, it's our YouTube channel where we do streaming tech related. Do you know the correct? Chasm was our 100th.
That's
subscriber.
right.
He knows the correct.
I think it was more of a.
Looks like Irving
What
has
is
a
it?
partner.
Do a plug.
Yes,
There must be something here he didn't want us to see.
I'm assuming he had it on him, Chris. No harm to you.
What is it?
What is it? What's this? What's this? Dun, 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 dun.
This.
The oiled field.
Chris is
Right
jacked.
from the
Look at that arm.
marshlands.
You know, Hook, see when you're like that, you know, coming from experience.
Delta team, Chris here. We located Irving, but he got away.
Right?
Do you know where he went?
We think he's heading for an oil field in the marshlands.
Okay, I'm sending someone after him now. I need you two to head back this way.
Roger that.
Head back? Nah, you're alright. I'll stay with
Oh, sniper rifle.
Ooh, take it. Maybe one each. Oh, there is a downstairs in here at least.
We're getting shot.
You will see that. That's not good.
Nope,
You start that game.
it's not great. Like,
How the hell did you crouch? Ow. You didn't crouch, there's somebody behind us.
is there? Oh, right, okay.
I got it. Ow. Machine guns
People
flying.
tried to raid out each other. It might do. Although we had it the other day. Latency rated on the me as. How could I? Oh, I don't know. Latency rated on the me as I was about to raid on the him. So it almost happened. Come on.
Oh, what a punch.
Got him. Right, got the guy beside,
Nice.
behind the gun. Not a huge amount of ammo, that's the only thing.
Yeah. No. Please stay. There we go. Oh,
Oh, crap, right, okay. There's a guy behind that gun again.
is there? For fuck's sake. Right, we need to take out everybody.
I have no ammo left to get him.
Right, I'll come on. Oh, I think I have sniper ammo.
No, it's alright, I got him. Got him with a
Oh,
handgun.
sweet. You got him on a handgun? Nice.
Yeah, the laser pointer just makes it stupid accurate.
That's how black gold. Black golds are made. I suppose so. I see what you're saying.
Right. I don't know what we're supposed to do now. Where are we going?
He said to come back, so we need to go back outside. I think.
Let's say we rush him now, just.
I suppose so. Now there's door and stuff here, so maybe we can go out this way.
I'm outside, I'm making a run for it now. Oh shit, there's somebody back up at that gun.
Ah shit, I've locked myself. I went the wrong way. Bollocks. Need to go downstairs.
With him, I run out of
Okay.
ammo and I'll run.
Maybe you can just run. Back it. My thumb is sore from click and sprint.
He's like, oh no, I'm reloading. Headshot.
Give me this ammo, please.
Are you back outside yet?
I am beside you.
Cool beans.
Right, so we're running up a cellar. I'm going to reload. Come on.
You taking the gun?
Is that the right one? You
I
are?
see him, he's up there.
Wait. Oh. Crossbow guy there.
Right, I'm assuming there's gonna be. Oh no, it only points one direction. No!
No! Terrible.
Wasted opportunity.
Right. There's going to be more ammo and shit about here.
Yeah. Maybe they'll make us go the whole way back down again.
Maybe. Right, we need to go up the ladder. There's a ladder here. Oh, you're okay.
Yes! Teamwork.
That was badass. That was badass. I like that. It's in a shame.
She didn't even climb down the ladder, she just jumped.
Ah, sure. Why not? Cutscene.
Good scene. I'm assuming you have to lift me up to the upper platform and then I making my way and then we kind of split
Yeah,
up a wee
there's
bit.
loot up here. I just shot it down. Cool. That's just you. There's a wee shiny up there. To your left. Don't go up a ladder. Up. There's a shiny against us. Fuck, that's dynamite.
You
That's
did?
not dynamite. Maybe. I am bleeding out, yeah. There's a guy here. Yeah, I'm dead. I'm dead. Unless you can shoot that guy. Oh, you shot me. Did you?
Ah, fuck.
No?
Did you bring bug spray? I think I had red. I don't have any green.
Bug spray? What thing?
I love the fact you can
right,
go
that's
on and kind of upgrade and stuff in between.
I'd rather have the health than the fucking grenades, to be honest. Wait, how do I say again? Organize? Yeah, there we go. Ammo was killing me at the minute.
Yeah, I'm kind of
so
low on
scarce.
ammo as well. Ammo's not too bad, but my loneliness is killing me. My loneliness.
Can't buy ammo either, which is well known. Right, I'm ready now. There's not much I can do. Oh, ads are about to start. You're gonna need bug spray.
Are we snoozing them ads in?
Yeah, I'll snooze the ads too. We can get there quick enough. Oh, can't get out of the game. Snooze. Yeah, I'll snooze and see if we can finish the
button on your
sequence.
stream deck?
No, I should do it actually.
That's so handy. Both jokey and seriously. Just use your hand.
Of course. Right. Oh, it's not a terrible checkpoint actually.
We didn't need it. It's the other way.
Bollocks. Whack me up.
There's handgun ammo there where we drop down.
Right, okay, perfect.
Right, you need to jump me up here now.
I need to get that guy with just chucking the dynamite though. Where's that ammo? Because I threw you up and then dynamite landed at my feet and that instantly killed me.
Yeah, I could see it even being thrown during a cutscene as well.
Oh, for fuck's sake, you got
Are
me
you down again?
Yep. And you can't heal like this either. I'm dead. Again.
Where are you? Where are you?
Not that far from me, but I think I'm there above you. Yeah. That's sick. Shot him in his winky.
Shot him in his winky. His winky woo.
Right, we need to shoot that guy straight away with the dynamite before we try and do anything.
Right, okay.
Because
I
it just
don't have
one-shots me regardless of where I am.
I don't have any sniper rounds, that's the only thing.
I do. So I'm not going to throw you up here until I can...
He won't appear until we jump down, that's what I mean.
But he was through. Oh, right, okay. Right,
See,
he's
he
on that
already
first.
throws it there.
Yeah, can I see him though? That's the thing. Can't. Oh, the shot is so shaky.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, he's dead.
That's him dead.
Shoot an enemy's dynamite stick. We got an achievement for it. Nice. Right, now we
His
can-
dynamite stick.
Why did you sound like Trump there?
What?
You sounded like Trump there when you said that. Dynamite stick.
Shit.
Sounds like still more dynamite enough.
Me being here was of no use whatsoever because I just went up and got damaged.
Nice. You still not dead? Yeah, there's
Someone?
another dynamite guy. Fuck, he got me. You healed him? Need him. Oh, no! Shit, it's right behind me. There's a guy with dynamite who's right behind me. What the fuck? Down beside.
Are you alright?
No,
I've
there's
killed
one-
two.
one.
I've
There's
killed two
guys-
dynamite boys.
There's guys with dynamite everywhere.
Yep. They just have explosive personalities. Cause I'm TNT. I'm dynamite.
We'll be able to move this alone. Come on, can you help me with this? Oh, never mind, let's take these guys out. Right. Here, this green crate. Can you help? Nope. Never mind, never
We can
mind.
invest. Oh, we have to push it from this side.
Oh. Right, can we push it now?
I have to get this dynamite guy.
Okay. Right, come on. Quick, quick, quick.
Right. I got it.
Nice. I think we dropped down, did we? No.
Right, let's go.
Yep.
I only have shotgun rounds as well.
Okay.
I'm running low on everything.
I took you down there. I think we did it.
The bear is a boss going to appear now. I'm John Boss. Fat Boss.
Ads. I got them in time, I think.
Batman.
Oh shit.
I'm
they love their trucks. Something's going to come out of the back of that truck, isn't it?
We're going to bed. Ignitus, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much
Ignitus.
again for the follow. Have a good night.
All the best, dude. Thank you very much for hanging out. I think this is a boss fight. Once we get past it, I think.
Better, strong. I'm better.
Batman.
I'm stronger. I'm Batman.
Sci-fi decompression noise.
Still, my favorite line out of Batman is actually from Arkham Knight, where he rescues the guy at the very start on top of the building. He's all, but they have tanks. What are you going to do? Even the odds. And then the Batmobile comes on. That's just awesome.
Yeah.
Or what are you doing? Even in the odds.
You're right about the boss fight.
Yep. Thank God we're not low on health and ammo.
No, exactly. Could be worse.
We'll just reload at him.
Oh, is he down for him? I'm assuming we shoot him in the red button. Yep.
I don't know. I'm just going around to see if there's anything that'll be of any use.
following you, dude.
But why?
This is great. He's just aggroed on you. Yeah, you want... Oh, shit.
I put down a bomb and it never even went off.
See if I stand on it, it goes me up. I don't have any explosives or anything.
I was getting greedy. I had to get some ammo there.
Oh, I heard it. Oh, there is. It's there. Oh, do you see the bomb? Oh, it has to stand on the bomb.
Does it? Right, okay.
That's what it does. Yeah. Or we can shoot it. Yep, there we go. That worked. I think we might have gone for like a CQC there or something.
CQC!
I think so. Is that more ammo?
It is, yeah.
Yes.
I'm
Oh
gonna
shit,
put the...
I'm trapped. I'm trapped. Oh, I got out. I got out. No, never mind.
I'm going to put down another bomb.
Okay. I shot it last time, that's what happened.
That's what we have to do now. It's still alive!
I have no bolts. Sorry to have shotgun shells. I just need to reload. Where is it? Is it flying? Oh, come on.
Well, that's not really fair, is it?
No, it's not. I can't fly. I'm full bullshit there.
Right, I have more bombs.
Okay, plant. I'll just keep going on here. Oh, bollocks, I ran straight on it. The Batman bid would be nuked from 3 miles away before you even got close to me, I think. That is the way to do it, think. There we go. Shoot the fucker.
Wonder if I can knife it. Yes, I can.
Yeah,
there we go.
GG.
Did the job. GG. Teamwork.
Nicely job.
Oh, flew away.
Oh, it's not dead.
Oh, Chris used his muscles and put his muscle power into the bolts.
He squeezed the trigger out. That's what it was. Oh, I'm steroids did the trick.
Oh, you can't park that there, mate.
That was actually a pretty good fight.
I enjoyed it. It's a good wee boss. Oh, he's just his friend.
Friendly. This must be what you
Car friend.
We've been looking for. Oh, it's going to be a Metal Gear sequence here.
It's some pure testosterone. That's what it was.
Yep.
It's steroids in the volts. A Gatling gun.
There, sweet. That's
there
a
we
good
go.
point. Nice.
Nicely job. Nice accuracy as well. 78%.
Oh, yeah, we both got S tier actually.
Yeah.
I actually won an accuracy in that one for the first time. Nice.
GG.
That was good. I enjoyed that, you know. Like the start, I was a wee bit like whelmed, as we were saying. I was like, what the fuck's going on? This is intense. But now that I've got used to the controls, I'm on board. This is quite fun.
I'm
progress.
I'm actually enjoying it. It's a very good game.
Yeah.
No, that's pretty. That was actually pretty sweet.
Right.
But who will we raid, Hook?
That is a good point. I forgot about that.
I think we should. I think we both should go under the same person. Double raid, por favor.
Aye,
we have
100%.
Who do I have? I have Kilka Beats. I have Graph. Bree.
Look at this graph.
Look at this graph. Let's see what other folks are on. Who do you have?
Yeah, well, see, the thing is, we follow a lot of the same people.
Yeah, true. That's part of the issue, isn't it?
Let's see. Was there anyone there that you didn't call it?
Jimmy. Easily.
Jimmy, Busby. What's Bubsy 3D?
Oh, it's that really, really bad platformer from back in the day. Like it's notoriously awful.
Right, okay, fair enough.
Saying for a bit of crack.
Yeah, 2K Celebration, I've seen that she's doing there. I've Gonta, he's playing Resident Evil 3.
I don't know who that is.
Remake. I don't know if you know Gonta, actually. Came in back when I was playing Resident Evil back in the day as well. Sound fella, to be fair. Did a lot of speedrun stuff in the past as well. For different various games.
Yeah, we could read them. Just fire their name in the chat and I'll
we'll do, yeah.
and paste it.
Why not? Let's have a look. I've been by a Gonta stream in quite a while. I see he actually has a YouTube model now, which is new. It's sent to you there. He's doing Resident Evil 3 Remake. Biorand. Oh, so he's doing a randomizer. Okay.
Yeah, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pop in the raid message in the chat, and it's going to bring up whether chat has beat the boss or not.
About that. Where did I put it?
Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see.
Raid message.
No, the boss still won.
Fix. Absolute fix. Folks, you know what? Thank you for sticking with us, because co-op streams can sometimes, if we both have discussed ourselves offline, they can sometimes be hard to watch, and chat on especially. So thank you for hanging out. You've been well sound. I really enjoyed that, I have to say. Double, it has been a pleasure.
Double, thank you very much for coming on.
Catch you as well. Hopefully you have a good day, man. I'm off now to get some supper and go to bed. It's my plan.
The same. I'm for work in the morning, but we're both right on.
Yeah.
And I will see you folks when I stream on Wednesday, and you're back again on Tuesday, aren't you?
I'm back on Tuesday with Star Wars, yep.
Happy days.
Right, folks.
Anybody in my chat's on film, really don't use all our anyway, but I will see you all later. Have a good night. And
all the best.
Bye.
The screen goes dark, but I still see your face. A trail of sparks where we ran through the place. The map is folded, the road